All right. All right. So, I don't know who knows this, but there's this girl called Naima, and she has been on Jubilee a few times, a couple other programs. She did pretty well. Not well, she did good enough against Charlie Kirk on a few occasions. They weren't very long interactions. Um, But this is the last of the debates from the whatever podcast debate week that basically just happened. And she decided to go toe to toe with Andrew Wilson for 3 hours and 48 minutes approximately. Um, I have higher hopes than I did for the other contestants we saw, but we'll see. Um, We'll see. So far, it was a pretty rough showing. We had that podcast guy, Raphael. He had no refutation or argument for anything he came up with. That was really a bummer. Then we had Oliver, the guy who debated Jim Bob before, and that was supremely disappointing as well. I didn't cover that one live because it's just not really interesting listening to Oliver debate. Um, he's like really, it's all really ideologically driven. There's not a lot of substance there. Um, then we had, what was her name? Kylie. That was a disaster, unmitigated disaster. She was atrocious. She rage quit. She threatened to rage quit after like 60 seconds of actual debate. She interrupted the opening statements twice. Um, at one point, she was crying. Um, a fan of hers had to pay to bail her out of the situation. It was just a mess. The whole thing was a mess. Now, that being said, uh, Naima could be a little better. She has a little more experience speaking with these like big conservative pundits. So we'll see. Yeah, even in the title, she's Naima from Jubilee. I don't agree with all of her stuff, but yeah, we'll see what happens. She is still just like a college student that with like TikTok and whatever, but you know, hopefully she does a better job than the other three because they were an embarrassment. And without further ado, here we go.
Edition of the Whatever podcast coming to you live from Santa Barbara, California. I'm your host and moderator, Brian Atlas. A few quick announcements before the show begins. This podcast is viewer supported. Heavy YouTube demonetization, so please consider donating through Streamlabs instead of soup chatting, as YouTube takes a brutal 30% cut. That's streamlabs.com/whatever. Link is in the description. We prioritize messages that are made via Streamlabs. To read a message is $199, or excuse me, not $199, $200 and up, $199 and up. We will read those in batches at various breaks throughout the debate. There will be no instant TTS, and I do ask that the audience has good discipline when it comes to the super chats and the chats. And if you want to criticize, attack the idea, not the person. Now, if you want to just tip and have 100% of your contribution go towards us, no platform fees, no cut, you can via Venmo or Cash App, whatever, pod on both. The link is in the description. We're also live on Twitch right now. Pull up another tab, go to twitch.tv/whatever, and drop us a follow on the Prime side if you
Skip a
have
little
one.
Brian
Quick
talking.
disclaimer, the views expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of the debater and political commentator.
Andrew
Also
Wilson.
joining us, California, she's
Naima.
Feminist. The show is for messages. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my position on feminism is that it's terrible for society. And as we go through this, I'll kind of flesh that view out using what I call force doctrine so that you can understand why I have that same set. But force doctrine basically just states that while feminism definitionally is the movement towards egalitarianism and equity for the removal of patriarchal systems, that feminists will always have to appeal to patriarchy in order to try to remove patriarchy, which is ironically hilarious. But a few things I wanted to get to first is that I went through several hours of my opponent's content, and I've actually not ever seen her make a single argument for anything that she believes. No, I've seen her assert a lot of things, but not an argument for anything she actually believes. So I have some notes here, and I was hoping she could help me clear some of these things up. From the Surrounded September 8th, 2024 episode, she says abortion is murder. The prompt is abortion is murder and should be illegal. She asked for a viability time for 20 weeks and thinks abortion before 20 weeks is acceptable. She says the fetus is technically classified as a parasite. The fetus cannot exist outside.
I don't think that's true, just based on the definition of parasite. The abortion thing is so cringe, nerd, AIDS garbage.
The womb and therefore is a parasite. The actual definitions don't support this. An organism living in, on, or with another organism in order to obtain nutrients, grow, multiply. That would be an actual definition of a parasite, or someone or something that resembles a biological parasite living off of, being dependent on, or exploring another. Fetuses can't fit that definitionally. Fetus is the same species. Biological parasites are classified as other, not the same species. Also, mutual biology. Mothers and fetus co-adapt, and mothers are actually healthier while they're pregnant, so it can't really be a parasite. Parasites are rarely temporary, and fetuses are, and none of that fits the criteria for a parasite. On our video, Middle Ground, Progressives versus Moderates, and this is from January 19th, she says the prompt is, does the far left make Democrats lose elections? She said Kamala was not progressive enough, not far left enough. She talks about how women's rights are being stripped, but didn't give any examples of what those are. So I'm actually really confused about a lot of her positions, including her rematch against Charlie Kirk that happened March 5th, 2025, why DEI is unlawful. Her rebuttal to Kirk was bizarre. It just had something to do with there's no racial factor in DEI, even though Kirk gave a pretty good rebuttal for that. So I'd like her to kind of dive into what she actually believes within the paradigm of feminism. But for my positive position, I will say I have a logical argument called force doctrine, and my logical argument called force doctrine refutes the feminist ideology, and it just works.
It refutes a few specific types of feminist ideology, specifically those that call for the complete dismantling of patriarchy. There are other types of feminism that do not call for the dismantling of patriarchy, and force doctrine does not refute those types of feminism.
As I explained before, that patriarchy must always be appealed to in order to try to eliminate patriarchy. Women can't enforce their own rights collectively, and men can. Therefore, women always have to appeal collectively to men for their rights. So you're always going to essentially have a patriarchy through force doctrine, and there's nothing women can do about that. So I'm willing to logically go through that and have it examined rigorously, but I'm hoping that with that, you can also describe your positions so that I understand them better.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. If you'd like to give your opening statement.
Yes, thank you, Andrew.
That was basically the classic Andrew Wilson intro there. A shorter version, though. Very concise and to the point that time. Let's see how she does.
True. I do think that is an interesting claim that I don't, state my arguments, because I've actually been watching some of your content, and I've noticed kind of a similar trend as well within these debates, where you will ask your debater questions but will not put forth your argument, including in your opening statement. You state force doctrine, but instead of elaborating on it, you consistently talk about what I've talked about, which only one of those topics was actually related to feminism. Now, when it comes to my actual beliefs, I think my goal and my hope for this country is to see us advance as a society. I would like to see everyone have bodily autonomy, and I would like for the vast majority of people, if not everyone, to have their basic needs met. And I would like to mitigate any unnecessary conflict between the citizens of this country, genuinely. I think that my main issue with the manosphere and with your forced doctrine principle is that it promotes and spreads divisiveness against men and women. It promotes and spreads violence against men and women, and it exaggerates and focuses the differences between the genders. I think that men and women, I know men and women are the same species. We are 99% genetically similar, and the obsessive need to define and separate people based on one singular chromosome is...
That 1% is a huge difference. It's a huge difference. It completely changes our physical makeup and a lot of, how we think and react to stuff. So I don't know. I'm not really sold on that line.
Doing both men and women a disservice socially, economically, and politically, which we can get into. I'm ready to open it up if you want to.
Yeah,
I
sure.
guess actually I'd love to start with a question for you. I would like to go back to the forced doctrine theory, if we can. I just kind of want to understand more. I know you've talked a lot about the equal force objection in the past. You've said men have essentially a monopoly on force.
Correct.
If I'm correct? Okay, perfect.
Do you want me to walk you through the argument?
No, I'm going to elaborate. Thank you. And that rights exist through physical force, and that our legal system is based on physical force. So I guess I kind of just want to hear you elaborate on that now, if you're welcome.
So you want my argument for the force doctrine?
Yep.
Okay, so what force doctrine is saying is very simple. That feminism, if you at least agree with my definition, and it seems broadly feminists do, that it's a movement towards egalitarianism and equity and the removal of patriarchy. If you can't have an oppressed class without an oppressor class, at least not from the Marxist feminist view. In the case, if women are being oppressed, they're not being oppressed by wolves, they're being oppressed by men, right? So if that's the case, then my argument to them is that whatever you believe this oppression is, you will actually have to appeal to men in order to either relinquish whatever this oppression is, or concede to whatever it is that they want, because collectively women actually cannot overthrow any patriarchal systems. They rely on the force of men. And so if men, anytime they want to, decide to remove women's rights, there's actually not anything women can do about it, but the opposition is not true. The opposite is not true. Women cannot collectivize and take away men's rights.
Okay, so are you essentially saying that women do not deserve the right to fight for their own free will or have free will?
Yeah, that's an ought claim. I'm not making an ought claim. I'm trying to get us to the descriptor first. So instead of making a prescriptive statement, I'm starting with a descriptive statement. What is true, and then we can worry about what should be true after we can determine what is true.
Okay, but I'm trying to see, like, structurally, how does that work in the real world? Are you saying that women should not fight for their rights because they...
Listen, let's back up so I can distinguish two things.
Okay.
Is, ought, right?
Sure.
I'm not trying to bridge the is-ought gap. I'm trying to start with a descriptive claim. So if the descriptive claim is true, then we can move to the prescriptive side of it. But right now, you would either need to agree with me that descriptively I'm right or that descriptively I'm wrong.
I can't agree with you to say that descriptively you're right until you apply what you're saying in theory to the practice of modern day society. How does your equal force objection, how does this principle work in society? What are you saying in terms of how women and men coexist?
Yeah, I think that because that is the case, that men deserve to have various privileges that they're not given in society, which they should be given in society.
So what are the privileges that you think that men should have that women should not have?
Well, primarily, I think that if you're going to look at an equalization, what I would do prescriptively would be to roll voting back. And that's for both sexes. I think that rolling voting back for both sexes is a good idea, and have some sort of perhaps like one house voting system. Or
the problem with all of so he's going to do the one house voting system. He's going to do the some kind of service to your country. Sometimes he says 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It's always unpaid. The problem with all of these is that you actually, in any of them, you would lose a chunk of highly intelligent voters. And his argument kind of always boils down to he doesn't want unintelligent or uninformed voters canceling out the votes of informed or intelligent voters. But if it's just performing a service to the country for 5 years, like, anyone can do that. Almost anyone can do that. And now they get to vote, and he probably won't think that those people are always super intelligent or informed. Same thing with the marriage or family version of that. Anyone can get married and have kids. The poorest people in society tend to actually have the most kids. So I don't actually think Andrew believes either of those things would be better. I just don't buy it.
One marriage voting system, or people who have done some sort of collective service to the state for a voting system.
Yeah, collective
I think
service
that
to the
those
state.
things would all be very good systems for everybody.
Why?
Now I would apply that, I would apply that broadly to men, and I would apply that to women. I think that right now men get the shaft because men are...
At least he's not doing the outright women shouldn't vote thing. He seems to have rolled back on that a little bit.
Men are required to do a lot of jobs that women are not, which keeps society going, and women are not doing those things. And because of that, I don't understand why it is that women can nullify their votes and disenfranchise them, and most importantly, vote to send them to wars they don't have to go fight in.
So you would like to disenfranchise both the men and women's votes?
Mostly. Most of them, yes, I
What
think would be a better idea.
this achieve?
Well, it would achieve the same thing our founders basically wanted to achieve, which is that they thought that you would have to have a stake in the country in order to vote.
But if you live in the country and if you exist in the country and if you're being legislated by the laws that the country is making, don't you have a stake in that?
No, not always.
You don't?
In fact, many times you don't. Many times, many people actually get more back from the state than they put into the state. So that's at the expense of other people.
Who is that?
But you're still subject to the laws and regulations of that state. And also, he didn't make the argument that net taxpayers should be the ones who can vote. He's kind of moving the goalposts around a little bit. We'll see where it goes.
That.
So there's lots of people who get a mass amount back from the government that they never pay to the government. This can happen through things like Social Security, disability, things like welfare, things like even earned income child credit that you may receive even though you don't actually pay anything into the system or very little into the system.
But it's a crime to lie on your taxes and commit. Isn't that tax fraud to claim a dependent?
No. There's just...
That is.
Oh no, she's confused. She thinks he means people that are lying to get. He means the legitimate or legally legitimate tax burden that most people are on society. They get more from the system legitimately than they put into the system legitimately. She thinks he's talking about like people who commit tax fraud. He's not talking about that.
No. It's not tax fraud. I'm saying that there's people who get more out of the system than they put into the system.
Okay, but they're still at stake because they still live here now. Are their lives not?
Founding fathers didn't give everybody the right to vote from the beginning.
I mean, the founding fathers also endorsed and owned slaves. Do you agree with chattel slavery?
Well, just let her finish. Go ahead.
I mean, the founding fathers also endorsed and owned slaves.
Just let her
Okay,
finish.
but
Do you believe in chattel slavery?
So you do realize that they could do bad thing, right? I can agree that's bad thing, but that has nothing relationally to do with how they set up the system of government.
I mean,
Yeah, but you kind of just didn't appeal to authority. We should do this because the founding fathers wanted it that way. So I don't know what his point was there.
I thought this was going to be a debate on feminism. Honestly, I think that's kind of wild because it sounds like you're disenfranchising men. So who do you think would be? Are you trying to go back?
I'm not.
You are. You're taking away.
I'm not disenfranchising men. Calm down. I'll explain.
But if you're taking away the votes of a man because he is not, I guess, landowning, is that what's the criteria for having a vote?
I think ultimately more men would be voting because they would have more stake.
So can I ask, can every man go to prison?
Yeah.
Okay, if they commit a crime, they can go to prison?
Yeah.
Everyone can do that?
Yes.
Okay. And everyone is in this country has to abide by the laws of this country, otherwise they will go to prison, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so why wouldn't they be allowed to vote on the representatives that define those laws? If that is a stake. If you can go to prison for committing
Kind of, but this doesn't logically follow all the way to the end because like people who are here on vacation can go to prison, but they don't get to vote. So like just being able to go to prison in a country, I get what she's saying. You're like integrated into the system. You're always going to be subject to the laws and regulations of that system. I think just saying that you could go to prison part is a little I don't maybe it's reductive, I'm not sure. But the answer should be it's that full system integration. So it's not just like if you break the law, you go to jail. There's like all kinds of regulations and stuff that apply to you that wouldn't apply to someone who's here on vacation necessarily. So I get what she's saying. I think she should reformulate it another way.
a crime that is created by the government, then you do have a stake legislatively in the laws that the government creates.
That still wouldn't follow that you would need to vote.
Yes, you would need to vote.
Why?
You want to vote for the representatives that create laws that are just and fair to you.
Yeah, why? Like you could have
Because you could go to prison.
Okay,
That's a huge stake.
Let me show. I'll show you. Right? Can kings put you in prison?
Yeah.
Can kings also pass just laws?
Sometimes, maybe.
Okay, so
maybe not.
if kings pass just laws, why do you need to vote?
Well, why did we fight an entire
answer the
revolution?
question before you ask another one. I just answered all of yours. If a king passes just laws, why?
Well, we vote because the alternative is when people didn't like the laws kings made, they did revolutions. Instead, we vote. So like that's the argument for voting is instead of revolutions. That's like the main argument for democracy as opposed to monarchy.
Why would you need to vote?
Because a king can also pass unjust laws.
So can legislatures.
Sure, but if you have a stake in that and if you're able to represent for your legislator, you can vote a legislator out.
Yeah, but you can
can't
also
vote a king
rebel
out.
against kings. So like that's what I'm saying. Your position doesn't follow. It doesn't actually follow for you to say,
Well, no, it does follow. She's not saying the whole position though. It does follow because we don't want rebellion in the country. We would rather people vote instead of revolution.
that because you can be imprisoned inside of a nation, that somehow gives you the right to vote.
Well, because
Hang
you
on.
have a stake. You're saying that.
Hang on. I'm
people
falsifying
don't
your
have a
claim.
stake
I'm
in-
falsifying your claim. If you claim kings can make just laws, right?
Yes.
Then I don't understand. Why would people need to vote when kings are making just laws?
Well, then why would
Petrie, I knew the left was lying about Trump when they called him a racist, but didn't say one word about Joe's extremely racist 60 years in government. Interesting. We are watching a debate about feminism right now, though. I don't know. I don't think Joe got brought up yet, but cool.
would we leave the monarchy of England? If kings can make just laws, why would we leave?
Well, in that case, you had a nation apart that had a rebellion against the king.
Yes,
That's what was
sure.
going on. But kings have been rebelled against historically under certain circumstances many times.
So you'd like to go back to feudalism? Like
No,
you
it's not
don't believe in
feudalism.
democracy? Well, yeah, that is.
No,
the
it would be
feudalism.
a
Feudalism is under a monarchy.
It would be called limited democracy, which is exactly what we had here. Do you think we had feudalism because most people couldn't vote here?
We had limited democracy, and then there were like many uprisings against that limited democracy because everyone
No,
deserves.
there-
Uprising is kind of a strong word. There were movements. There was really only one uprising, civil war. There haven't really been any other large-scale revolutions within the United States, violent ones at least. That's how what I would consider an uprising. I wouldn't consider like protesting. So like the civil rights movement, I wouldn't really consider that an uprising. The other movements we've had along the years, sort of tangential to civil rights, I wouldn't really consider those uprisings. We've had several movements, though. That's true.
There
The
wasn't
right.
uprisings really against that. The only uprising that I'm aware of in American history against America was the Civil War.
The Civil War, the Civil Rights
But that wasn't
movement,
about
the first
voting.
feminist movement,
That
the
wasn't
second
about
feminist
voting.
movement, the Civil Rights movement,
No,
the
no,
voting
no,
rights
no,
movement.
no. The
All of
Civil
those were
War
about-
wasn't about voting.
Well, I mean, it was about the owning of chattel slaves.
So not about voting then?
Which is also about human and civil rights.
But not about voting though.
But voting is a civil right.
I don't know. I'm not sure that I believe in
It's
this.
about freedom and it's about
conceptual-
representation.
Yeah. So
the point is representation.
So let's back up.
That's what voting is.
Yeah.
Voting is representation and democracy.
I understand, but you haven't actually made the positive case for why people need to be able to vote.
People need to be able to vote because they have a stake in the legislation in this country. If you can be
Mm-hmm.
imprisoned at this country, if you can be robbed of your bodily autonomy
Mm-hmm.
by the legislators of this country, then you should be able to have a stake in what the laws that those legislators are making.
Well,
no?
let's see if this makes sense. Do you agree with me that individual voters don't actually have very much power at all?
Individual voters, no, but that's the point of a collective voting
Yeah,
body.
I'm with you. So
Yeah.
individuals already don't really have very much power just because they can vote, right?
Sure.
So isn't it the case actually that what you're advocating for is political tribalism? Because you don't have individual power as a voter, you actually have to tribalize with other voters in order to have any sort of collective power, right?
Well, you're taking away power from all the voters,
Well,
so it
can
wouldn't
you
even be
answer my
individuals.
question, please? Tribalism, the idea that you, as the individual, do not have power, right?
Yes.
You do have to collectivize with other people, right?
Okay, but how is taking
Hang on.
away
Can you
a
answer
vote?
yes or no?
No.
Yeah. Okay. No.
But
okay.
here's my question: how is taking away more people's votes disincentivizing political tribalism?
Yeah,
because now I have to
let her
band
finish,
with
let her
someone.
finish.
Because now I have to band with someone who has a vote. I don't even get a stake. So you're saying because people don't have enough power to vote, I'm going to take what little power they do have.
You're not
away.
answering my question, though.
It just doesn't make sense
Yeah, I
structurally.
know, but you got to answer my question.
It just doesn't sound like you believe in.
It sounds like you need to
democracy.
answer my question, though.
It sounds like your question is
Yeah,
meant to
can
trap
you-
me because
can you
your
just,
argument
Can you
is
just
riddled with
answer the
logical
question,
fallacies.
please?
It sounds-
What's fallacious about my argument?
You're saying
I've already pointed out several of them, but one that immediately comes to mind, just off what he was just saying, limiting the number of voters would not change the fact that they could be influenced by NGOs or lobbyists. I mean, that doesn't change that at all. So that's one. And then there were a few more before.
saying that people do not have a stake in this country, therefore they do not have a right to vote.
It's not what I said.
Yes,
What
it
you're doing
is.
is a straw man fallacy.
Can we go back to
Yeah,
what
you
he
can
said?
go. You can go
Let's-
back.
Can
What
we
I
double
said
back
to you
that?
specifically is what you're saying doesn't logically follow. And when I'm talking about political tribalism, do you agree with me that you do, if you need to have collectives to have actual political power, are you not promoting political tribalism?
If you need to have but that's how voting works. It's about a majority.
So then you are
Yes.
promoting collective political tribalism, right?
So voting and then the will of the majority is essentially political tribalism, is what you're saying?
Well, it's not really the will of the majority.
It is the will
Here's
of
what
the
happens.
majority.
No, not really.
Do you understand how voting works?
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay, well then tell me how it's the will of the majority when a California legislator gets elected.
Well, everyone who would like to vote can vote,
Uh-huh.
and then whoever
What
gets
about
the most
what about the
votes
people in Georgia?
wins. Well, why would a person in Georgia get to vote on a
So
legislator
it's not
for a
really the
California state
collective, it's
legislator?
the tribe, right?
But then Georgians get to vote for their
Right,
state
so it's a
legislator.
tribe then?
And then all of those legislators come together
So it's a
to
tribe.
create laws.
So it's a tribe?
It's not a tribe, but
Well,
Whether or not it's tribalism is wholly and entirely irrelevant. Where is he going with this?
those are called states.
yeah,
That's what
states are voting for their own interests, right?
But states will vote for the governors.
Yeah.
Why would I get to vote for the governor?
Wait,
Hold on,
yeah,
pause.
Hold on. Let her
Listen to
finish.
me. Why would I get to vote for the governor of, let's say, Tennessee, if I
Right.
don't live in Tennessee?
Makes sense.
Okay.
So it's almost
So
like
then
these
why would-
individual states, right? They vote along tribal lines for that state's particular interests, right?
Yes, and
They're
then
not
each state has a representative
Right,
in
which
the
they said?
collective government.
Sure. In the federal government, right? You're
Uh-huh.
talking about in our Senate and in our Congress, right?
Yes.
Great. So let's start with this. If it is the case that you have California and Nevada, these are two states which are next to each other, you agree,
Sure.
right?
Yes.
Can these states vote against each other's interests when it comes to
course they can.
resources?
In the federal government, yes. they
No,
can.
even at the state level they can, right?
Why would they be able to at the state level? I can't vote for the Nevada governor. I can't vote for
Because perhaps there's something
Nevada
that perhaps Nevada has some type of, I don't know, assessed tax or something like this that they're able to collect, which disproportionately affects Californians in some way. They can do that, right?
What law is that?
Whatever it would be, they
So
can do
does
it.
it exist or does it not exist?
Listen, can they do that? Can they do that is my question.
Can Nevada legislate against California?
No, they're not legislating against. Listen to my question. Actually, I want you to repeat my question so I know you actually heard it.
I'm sorry, I'm not a dog. I
Can
don't
you repeat
things.
it? Well, it's
No.
called steel manning a position.
Just say the question. then.
Okay. Can states vote against other states?
I love how she's just absolutely refusing to play the little like debate bro shenanigans that Andrew does. I really like it. Like, no, if you want me to answer something I'm not answering, ask the question again.
States' interests simply by having a neighboring state, right? Let's just say, for instance, that you were to have like, oh, I don't know, trucks which went between Nevada and California, right?
Yes.
And California took advantage of this by raising taxes on gasoline, but only on the border areas where these goods came in. This disproportionately hurts Nevada truckers for some reason, right? They can do that, right?
Yes, they can do that.
Okay, great. So in California, if that was beneficial to Californians, they would basically be voting for their tribe against Nevada, right?
But is that happening?
It
or
does
are you
happen.
just trying to use a hypothetical?
No, there's tons and tons of instances where different states do various things, even asking for federal money in overages compared to other states for different problems. Same thing with disaster support. They definitely are all trying to support their tribe, right?
Okay, so because states can potentially, hypothetically, vote against another state's interest, men and women should not have the right to
No,
vote.
that's not the conclusion.
But that was your argument.
No,
the
that's-
privilege is
no, we're-
you
again, do you
stated
know what a
no voting,
descriptor
both
is?
sexes,
What's a
one marriage voting system.
Why don't you understand the difference between a descriptor and prescriptor? What did I prescribe?
What you prescribed is one voting system, is a voting
Yes.
system in which
What
both
I'm
men and
doing-
women are disenfranchised.
Yeah, what I'm doing right now is I'm giving you descriptors so we can determine if it's tribalism or not, because you said it's not tribalism to have collectivism in voting blocks, which is insane.
But what you haven't been able to answer is why disenfranchising more voters is somehow
let me-
solving
hold on,
political
Hold on, just
tribalism.
let her get to the end
All
of the
right.
sentence, please.
Well,
Go
let me
ahead.
explain it
Sure.
the best way that I possibly can.
I hope
Your
you try.
worldview promotes political tribalism. So what happens is this: NGOs can go to our government and they can bribe them for voting blocks, and that's exactly what they do. Non-government organizations do this, and lobbyists do this. And what they do is they raid the treasury from people like you and me so that they can bribe certain portions of the electorate in order to incentivize them to collectivize.
Okay.
That's why black people often vote as a monolith, for instance. They vote monolithically, up to 80-90% together, especially in national elections, because they're made certain promises out of the treasury from the electorate, usually at the expense of other forms of voters. This is 100% tribalism.
So how are NGOs bribing politicians, influencing who black people as individuals choose to vote for?
How do NGOs do that?
I just don't understand how you're saying. I mean, I agree that NGOs should not be bribing and lobbyists shouldn't be bribing, but instead of
I mean, that's what
saying-
they do, though, right?
Okay, but we're trying to get back to your claim that
I'm in the
less
middle of
people
my
should
claim.
vote. Okay, well, I'm responding because this is a conversation.
Yeah.
Sure. So we're trying to get back to your claim that less people from both sexes should be able to vote.
Yeah, no, that's not where we just were.
But that's your initial claim,
Yeah, but now
yes?
you're just pivoting. Where we just were was.
Well, you're not letting me
you
finish
said,
my sentence. If
No,
you'd let me
because
finish my sentence, we
you're
could go back.
pivoting. We're talking right now about whether tribalism is descriptively true in your voting system.
I understand that, but we're trying to get back to your initial claim.
It would be descriptively true in yours too, Andrew. This part of the conversation seems kind of pointless.
Because you have
Yeah.
a very important claim to defend. You're trying to
I
take
am
votes
defending
away from
it.
the American people
Yeah.
poorly, but let's get into
okay.
it. So NGOs bribe, lobbyists bribe,
Yeah.
and that is impacting who and what politicians are promoting. I would agree with that statement. Would you agree with that statement?
Well, not just what they're promoting, but Also, they are setting the precedent for laws themselves.
Okay, yeah.
So
sure.
they actually, I would even argue back that NGOs and private think groups write the laws in which politicians most often execute, and so do bankers as well.
I agree with that. So why would taking away votes from the average American and singular citizen prevent NGOs and lobbyists from having an ability to impact and predict and create laws?
Yeah, so if you move to stakeholder democracy, this idea that you had to have some sort of public service or something like this, it actually collectivizes down the voting pool, which adds responsibility to the voters who can then be held accountable, which right now voters can't be. That's why. That's why it's so important. So you're not
Voters
you're saying,
can be held accountable.
So you're saying how?
Well, legislators will create laws that hold those voters accountable. We're
How?
the ones who have to follow them. Do you not have
How
to
are
follow
they?
the
Well,
laws?
that's not you being held accountable.
It is being held accountable.
No. So right now, under tribalism, you can get laws passed which affect me, but benefit you. I can't go like hold you somehow accountable for that.
But that's how a majority voting works. That's how democracy
I know,
works.
which is why I want limited democracy where we can actually hold people
because
accountable.
you just want to be in charge.
So, Andrew, you want to be able to hold individual voters accountable, like to the populace, if they're the people that have been selected to vote through whatever convoluted means you've decided? Dude. This just doesn't make any sense, because the two arguments he put forward don't actually land in a place where we just only would have more intelligent and informed voters. It would just be whoever fits the random criteria, neither of which are indicators of a particular intelligence or informedness.
How would I be in charge if it's stakeholder democracy?
Well, you said one marriage voting system.
That could be one way of doing it, yes.
Okay, what are the other ways of doing that?
Another
But anyone can get married. So why would they necessarily be informed on voting?
good way would be public service.
So
Anyone can do public service. It just doesn't make any sense. If you want more informed and intelligent voters, this just doesn't make any sense.
Perhaps
does
up
a
to
public service.
Perhaps up to 3 to 5 years unpaid, or
Are you-
military service would be good.
So during this public service in which people are working 3 to 5 years unpaid, how are they paying for food and groceries and housing?
Yeah, so the state would take care of that just like they do in the military.
The state would take care of that like they do in the military. And how do you plan on getting that passed?
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, because
Let's
are
say
you
I
not
could
trying
never
to
get it
create-
passed. We're arguing the ideology of this system. What does that have to do
Well,
with anything?
What's the point in creating an ideology that will never work in
How are you going to get
practice?
Marxism passed?
You're not.
So
That's why it's
aren't
a
you a
bad
Marxist?
idea.
But you're a Marxist, right?
How did you know that?
Well, I don't
Who
know.
told you
That's what
that?
your videos seem to imply, that you believe in Marxist
Did I ever
feminism.
say that I was in Marxist?
Oh, I don't know. Are you a socialist?
On a certain level.
Okay,
somewhat.
how are you going to get socialist? Like, that's silly. That us making the comparison contrast.
I don't really know if there's like certain levels of socialism. Because the like furthest you can go where it's still capitalism is like there are co-ops and things like that, but all of these can just exist under capitalism, unless she means like social democracy, which is sort of just like the regular liberal position. Just sort of like the standard neoliberal-ish Democratic Party position of just having social safety nets and whatnot. I'm not really sure what she means by that, because once you hit socialism, it's workers own the means of production, and that's like the whole system is different. There's not like, that's like a very solid line you have to cross.
Between like socialism, capitalism,
But it's nice to hear she's not a Marxist, because that's nonsense.
has no bearing on whether or not I could somehow get this passed or have some plan to get it passed.
Okay.
I'm arguing about the ideology here.
Do you want to understand my belief or do you just want to guess?
Well, hang on. What does that have to? Do you know what I just said, though?
Well, I mean, you just called me a Marxist.
Do you
just called me a
agree?
socialist,
Well,
but
if
you
you're
don't
not a
even know what I
Marxist, I
believe.
said we're doing a comparison contrast of worldviews and ideology. If we're doing contrast worldview and ideology, it's a non sequitur to ask me, well, how are you going to get it passed? What does that have to do with anything?
Well, why would you create a worldview that fundamentally cannot work in practice? That
Well,
sounds
it's
like
not
a waste of time.
worldview that fundamentally cannot work in practice.
you couldn't
even
say
if
how
I
it works in
could, even
practice.
if I couldn't prescriptively tell you, like the next political chain of things we do to get there has nothing to do with whether or not the worldview in practice would work.
Well, do you have any practical guesses for how we could apply this to a modern day society?
Well, I just just told you how we would apply it. You would have stakeholder democracy.
Okay, so that's just so one day we're just going to flip a switch and have that. Like, I don't understand.
No, what do you mean? Okay, you could have an amendment for it. You could repeal the 19th Amendment. You could.
So you want to repeal the right to vote?
Or just replace it. It wouldn't be. What I'm talking about is universal suffrage. You keep on making a conflation in terms. You think that because I say universal suffrage, that means no suffrage. I'm talking about limited suffrage.
So who gets to decide who gets the right to vote?
Didn't I literally just tell you who gets to decide who gets to vote?
Okay, so
No, you didn't. She asked who gets to decide who gets to vote. And you answered just who you think gets to vote. Those are different questions. She shouldn't have let that slide. I feel like she's letting that slide.
everyone who participates in this public service gets the right to vote.
That could be one way to do it, yes.
Okay. And that anyone could do that. You wanted to?
Yeah, people could do it if they're willing to give up X amount of years of their lives for unpaid service so that they could then vote.
But it's not unpaid service because the government would be paying for their food and their housing.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be getting anything additional to that.
Okay, well, why not just have civil servants who are already
Because civil servants have specific jobs to do, like, working at the DMV and stuff like that, and working in the Social Security office.
So you're basically saying anyone who does community service should get the right to vote?
No, some sort of civil occupational service under the state. That could be like civil firefighting work, maybe. It could be civil paramedic work. It could be there's all sorts of different things you can look at for stakeholder democracy. When we've seen it applied around the world, it's been somewhat successful.
And do the laws apply to everyone in the society or just the people who choose to participate in this democracy?
Yeah, they still apply to everyone, yeah.
Okay, so how can you create and apply a law to people who are not represented? I just don't understand. Morally, how do you justify?
There's nothing immoral about it.
There's nothing immoral about. I mean, but that's
like,
kind of
I
like
would say
consent.
it's more immoral. Why is it moral for an 18-year-old to nullify the vote of a 41-year-old if the 18-year-old doesn't even know what they're voting for? How's that moral?
Well, because the 18-year-old is still subject to the laws of the state.
Yeah, but they don't even know what they're voting for.
Can an 18-year-old go to jail for 20 years?
A 16-year-old can. Should they be able to vote?
16-year-olds can't go to jail.
Yes, they can. 16-year-olds can go to jail for life. Should they be able to vote?
I mean, no, but why?
Well, why
would they
not?
Be going
Why
to
not?
jail
The laws apply to them, though.
Why would a 16-year-old be going?
Hang
to
on,
jail
I don't
for
understand.
that,
Because he murdered someone.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, if you murder someone, that's a whole.
So I don't understand. Why can't he vote? The laws apply to him. Why can't he vote?
Yeah, but we all understand that.
No, we all understand it's not an argument. Why does a 16-year-old get to vote even though all?
It's possible, but the specific words she said were, "Who gets to decide who gets to vote?" I don't know. Maybe she misworded it. Maybe he misheard it. I don't know. She seems to have just brushed past it and gone on to something else regardless. So
All the laws apply to the 16-year-old. Why does he get to vote?
No, the laws apply. They start in juvenile detention, and then at 18, they get the right to go.
So laws apply to 16-year-olds?
But you're retried at 18.
So
like when
laws
you start
apply
at 16,
to 16-year-olds?
Some laws, of course.
Okay,
yes.
great. Why can't they vote then?
So babies should get the right to vote?
That's
I mean,
my question to you. That makes no sense. Exactly. So why do we limit it to 18?
Well, that's the age that we've defined as being a legal adult. That's the age that we as a country have universally agreed with our right to vote is.
Yeah, but what
the
makes
age of
that a
legal
good
adult.
idea? Just
That's
because
the
you
age of
arbitrarily.
consent. That's the age
Yeah,
of-
but just because you arbitrarily say, for instance, that because you're 18 and you're an adult, like you can't buy cigarettes, you can't buy beer, you can't rent a car, but you're an adult. And now you can vote in the
So would you like to
participation of
lower the
democracy.
age of
At
an
least raise
adult?
it.
So you'd like to raise it?
At least raise it.
So you would like to universally raise the age to vote? I think that would be a better idea than like not allowing
No.
anyone.
What I said.
yeah, I'm actually not super opposed to a slight adjustment on the age of voting. I think that when you're just getting into college at age 18, it should probably be kind of like the year averagely that we're kind of done with school and going out into the workforce. So maybe like 22. I would be okay with that. That would make sense to me.
Says at least do that. But the thing is, like, you're actually inconsistent here. Your whole argument is to say if laws affect people, they should have a right to vote. But we have an entire cast of people from the age 17 down who laws apply to and can't vote. And you just are like, you shrug that off like you didn't contradict yourself.
I'm pretty sure it has something to do with brain development, but we've all, like, you have to have an
Not fully
age in
developed
which-
till what, 25 according
But how
to
do you have a
the
society
studies?
in which you don't have an age that someone becomes a legal
I
adult?
agree, but why couldn't you have a society in which you had stakeholder democracy? It would
Because
be, it's the
nobody-
same logic.
So if you're saying that we should not disenfranchise children, why would you then disenfranchise people who are legal adults?
When did I ever make the claim that I wanted children to be able to vote?
You just said that if everyone should have the
No,
right
I
to vote.
told you that your view is inconsistent. If it is the case propositionally, you say, Andrew, if laws apply to people, they should be able to vote. Except, oh, I don't know, everybody 17 and under. That's inconsistent.
Because the
hang
laws
on,
do
hang on.
apply to children
It's
differently than they
inconsistent
apply to
and a
adults.
contradiction.
But laws do apply to
What about the
children
laws that
differently
don't?
than they do.
What about the laws that don't? What about the laws where you're 17 years old and you can be tried as an adult?
Well, those are to protect, like, public freedom.
I feel like this whole chain of question is kind of a non sequitur. Because, like, if you're a legal adult and it, yeah, she should be formulating it as if you're a legal adult and you're engaging with the economy and you're, no longer in school, but then what about people who skip school, or don't go to college, or there's a lot of different chains you can go down. There's always going to be like little exceptions to everything. And that's like, there's always exceptions kind of to everything. But if we're just going like in general, then I mean, he still hasn't really, neither of them have brought it up though, honestly, refuted that like the reason we have voting is so that we don't have revolutions. And that's why there aren't like massive swaths of adults that are just completely disenfranchised from voting, because before we had voting, we had revolutions. Like that's just how that goes. Like when you didn't like the rules that a king was making, you did a revolution. And now with democracy, if you don't like the rules that the government's making, you can vote. And that's kind of like I'm not going to revolt, here's my vote instead. But neither of them have gotten to this kind of point, which I think she needs to get to, because it's a stronger point than like, if the laws affect you, you should vote. I mean, laws affect people that are here on vacation. I don't want them voting.
I mean,
Right.
but everyone loses civil liberties when they are a danger to the public.
Yeah, but do you
That's
really,
everyone.
do you understand that you're making a contradiction when you say if laws should apply to all people should have a right to vote because they have laws which can be applied, they can be sent to prison was your example. That would have to include everyone under the age of 18.
But people under the age of 18 don't go to adult
Yes,
prisons.
they do all
No,
the
they
time.
don't.
Yes, they do.
What's your
That
source?
is you want me to give you sources of 16, 17-year-olds tried as adults and sent to adult prisons?
Okay, but that's like an exception for exclusively horrific crimes. I mean, those
But
are violent offenders.
does the law apply to them or not?
To violent offenders, if you are a threat to public safety, yes.
Okay.
Everyone who
Then
is a
if
threat
the
to public
law
safety,
applies to them and they can be sent to jail, then by your logic, they should be able to vote, which
But for
means
those
you're in
offenders, they are-
contradiction.
to those offenders, they are sent to juvenile detention centers until they turn 18, and then they are sent to an
I don't really think she's in contradiction, because we categorically don't see children and adults the same. I don't know if we really got the number of what age you are an adult correctly. It should be more dependent on competency to vote, though. Yeah, I don't know. This one I struggle with because that's a tough thing to measure. Like different groups would measure that different ways. Like if a Republican wrote the test for like the voting test, it would look way different than if like a Democrat wrote the test. So like your competency to vote could be measured in like very different ways by different people that could potentially exclude just entire ideologies. Like if you just don't believe the things in the test. So I don't know. That would be a tough one. I mean, it could just be like on an IQ thing, but IQ doesn't necessarily correlate to like competency. It certainly doesn't correlate to what is it? It doesn't correlate to like empathy or like conscientiousness. That's it. IQ doesn't really correlate to those things. So I don't know. I get the idea of the competency. I really struggle to understand how it would be accurately measured. Darian, you were quite logical. Started following you recently. Thank you very much, Darian. And welcome to the chat. And the last one, I think feminism wouldn't really stand a chance if she granted force doctrine. Well, here's the thing. There's multiple versions of feminism. And if the version of feminism that you're supporting involves the complete dissolution of patriarchy, then yes, force doctrine is a pretty much a defeater. There are forms of feminism that don't call for the removal of patriarchy, though. And so, like, for example, Not So Erudite, she is a proponent of a type of feminism that does not require the dissolution of patriarchy. She thinks they can coexist. So if you are against an opponent that believes in one of those, then force doctrine it's not really a defeater for those. Like you could be a women's rights advocate. Yeah, all forms of them do appeal to patriarchy, but just appealing to patriarchy, like, so if your form of feminism doesn't call for the dissolution of patriarchy, then it can appeal to patriarchy for women's rights, and you can still be like a women's rights advocate and appeal to patriarchy for those rights. Like that's kind of where we exist currently. We sort of exist in a patriarchal and feminist society at the same time because we have a lot of women's rights and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. Here, let's see where they go with this.
An adult prison. They are
No,
still
they're
tried as a
sent
child.
often to adult centers, even at 17, to adult prisons.
You can be sentenced as an adult, but you can't be sent to an adult prison at the age of 16.
This would depend widely on the state that you're in. It's not rigorously enforced across the board like you think. There's not like, I don't think there's federal laws which say this. But
Well, then I
even if
think
it were the
that's
case,
wrong.
I'll just grant it.
Well, then that's wrong.
I'll even grant the entire thing. It still wouldn't matter. Laws apply to them. They can still be sent to prison. They fit both of your criteria. Therefore, if you say they shouldn't be able to vote, your worldview's in contradiction.
Well, then I think that's wrong. I don't believe that children should be tried as adults until they have become adults.
So no
I
laws
disagree with
apply to
that.
children.
No.
Well, then why shouldn't they be able to?
Darian, yeah, they're still in the is portion of the claim. They haven't really got to aughts yet. They almost did for a second. Well, the whole voting line of questioning started from an ought claim, but they went immediately back to the descriptive part.
Vote.
A threat to public safety always applies to everyone. Threats to public safety always apply to everyone.
Yeah, but why shouldn't they be able to vote if laws apply to them? That's your example.
Laws apply to children, but they are not in practice punished in the same way that they apply to adults. It's
Basic civics exam is kind of what you're saying. Yeah, that would be better. Like you have to know who your governor is, etc. You could make that pretty nonpartisan, just sort of like a current history test. I could see that possibly working. Yeah, something like that.
applied
Can they
differently.
be punished?
Of course they can
Then
be
why
punished.
can't they vote?
But you have to have some way to maintain societal control. Children aren't just allowed to do whatever the fuck they want because they're
Right.
kids.
You need to be able to have some sort of societal control. So
Yes.
this would mean necessarily disenfranchising some people, wouldn't it?
It would mean necessarily disenfranchising children. Yes, they're not
no,
adults.
it would also mean disenfranchising prisoners. Do you want prisoners to vote on their right to own guns in a prison?
Not their right to own guns in a prison.
Well, then you're
But I do
disenfranchising
think
them.
that people who were in prison and then leave prison should then have
Felons?
the right to vote.
But they're disenfranchised currently under the law, right?
No, they're not.
Yes, they are. If you're a felon, you can't vote.
Yes. Oh, well, once they leave, yes, I do think that that's disenfranchisement, and I think Florida just rolled that back.
Yeah,
for
but
Florida.
what's wrong with disenfranchising like murderers for life?
What's wrong with disenfranchisement? Well, they would be in jail for life if
No,
they
no, no.
committed a
They're
murder.
out of jail. They're just felons, so they can't vote.
Well, I think that felons should be able to vote once they
Should
have
felons
left.
be able to own guns?
No, because
Oh, well, I don't understand you. So you're again,
But do you
it's so
understand-
inconsistent with your
Pause, Meta.
disenfranchising.
Pookie, do you understand?
What?
Disenfranchisement should exist so long as someone is a threat to public safety. The reason why prisoners are not allowed to vote who are currently in prison is because they are a threat to public safety.
16-year-olds aren't a threat to public safety.
No, but they're children. You can't allow any.
Darren, Andrew could have done better here. He was not. Yeah, the voting thing, Andrew, it kind of falls apart. She wasn't making the best she's not making the best refutations ever, but his whole thing is really inconsistent. She's doing a much better job than the other three people he debated during this week, though, so far. I haven't watched the end of it yet. I've only watched what we've watched so far, so we'll see.
anyone
So
to vote
you
who's a
can
child.
arbitrarily disenfranchise people based on the fact that you think they're not capable of making good voting decisions, right?
No, a child is legally different than an adult.
Because they can't make
You can't have sex with a child.
Because
That
they
would be
can't make
statutory rape.
because they can't make good decisions.
No, because they're legally classified as a child. Do you not understand what
Because
a
they
child is?
can't make good decisions.
Because they're 2 and 3 and 4. They're not legally an
So
adult.
they can't make good decisions.
No, they can make good decisions, but generally speaking, you can't have children vote. There is a
I
legal
agree
age of
with
adult.
you. You can't.
Okay.
But why is it then that if I were to
Well, she made the claim that if you've served your time and then you leave, you should be able to vote, which, I mean, she can hold that position. It's not really an inconsistent position to hold.
say that I only want 25-year-olds to vote, I would be disenfranchising.
But you didn't say you only want 25-year-olds to
but
vote. You
do you
said
understand?
that you only want one marriage voting system per household.
Yeah,
You
well, that's
said
one way, yeah.
You want less of
But-
both adult men and
But do you
adult
understand how
women
my
to be
view is
able to vote.
consistent, but yours isn't? Because if you were to agree with me that you wanted, like, okay, Andrew, I would compromise the 25-year-olds voting, you've now disenfranchised everyone from the ages of 18 through 24.
If you were considered
all
a legal
overnight.
adult, you should be able to vote. That's my state. If you are considered a
Uh-huh.
legal adult, if you are tried as an adult, if you are allowed to buy a house,
Yeah.
have a child,
But that leads to the problem is that leads to political tribalism. So, like, for instance, why is it a healthy society to have men and women who are married voting against each other? That's a terrible idea.
because they're both like. But if a man commits a murder, does his wife go to jail for that crime?
No.
No, because they're not the same fucking person.
What does that have to do with anything?
If they're different people and they're both tried differently and they both have separate lives and
Yeah.
separate bank accounts
Yeah.
and separate bodily and physical autonomy,
Yeah.
then they should
Well, Andrew doesn't necessarily believe that they should have separate lives and separate bank accounts. So that's probably where he's going to go with that one.
each get a stake in this government. No.
Well, that literally has nothing to do with what I just asked.
They're not the same
So real
person,
quick,
so
can
why
you,
should they be
you
represented
remember
as the
how I
same
said
thing?
yes and no to your question? Can you do that for me? Remember how I was like yes and just answered it? Can you actually do that for
I
me
don't
too?
remember that at all.
You literally just asked me that question. You said, if a husband's carted off to prison, does her wife go to prison? I said no.
Okay.
Can you do that for me too, and then give your explanation? Because otherwise, you don't
That's
know
what I
your
just did.
actual
I said
position.
His thing and then gave the explanation.
So now I'd like to know,
You should
do
listen
you
to-
think it's a good idea for wives and husbands to be able to vote against each other's interests?
They should both have a vote, yes.
Well, but they can vote against each other's interests, right?
That is circumstantial. They may not, they might.
Yeah, they may not, they might. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But why is it good that option's even there? Seems like a terrible idea.
Because in a representative democracy, everyone should be represented with a vote.
Yeah, I get that's a descriptive truth, but you're not telling me why that should be the case. If I were to give you the counterclaim here, I would say if you had like one household voting or something like this, it would be much more uniform and wouldn't divide families against each other. And
Yeah, but if you had one household voting, then any two people who got married suddenly have a vote, and his whole well-informed voter thing just falls apart because literally the two dumbest people on the planet can go get married. Like, I understand his civic duty one a little bit more than this, but this one just makes no sense at all. Like, if he doesn't want uninformed people voting, then one vote per household system, that just makes no sense because literally any two people can get married. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
And that's exactly what the vote has done.
But they're both subject to the same legislative, like they can both be legislated independent of each other, right?
No, well, not really. One cannot at that point make a decision that doesn't affect the other one usually.
Yes, I can.
Not really. What?
I mean, Roe v. Wade. That only affects a woman's body, right? No?
You think that if a man is married to a woman and she goes and aborts his baby, that doesn't affect him?
Of course it does, but it affects him differently than his body.
But it's still, but that's my whole point is that everything they do in this household is going to affect each other.
Sure.
So you wouldn't want to promote systems
But they
which
still are
divide husbands
individuals.
against wives.
But they're individuals, no.
What is,
I agree with that general blanket statement that we should not be promoting systems that intentionally divide families. I feel like most people, not all, okay, nothing ever in a monolith, but I feel like most people tend to pair up with people that have similar values to them. It does happen a lot or not a lot, but sometimes comparatively, but I feel like for the most part, people tend to marry people that are in their similar socioeconomic circle. They usually, most people actually meet within their job field, generally speaking. If they meet in person, dating apps have kind of changed that a lot, but yeah, I don't see this like the vote like tearing families like a husband and wife apart. That doesn't really happen a lot. You may disagree with like your uncles or like your aunts or whatever. It might cause some division at Thanksgiving dinner, but I don't think that's a common problem. Like husbands and wives completely disagreeing on like civic values and societal values.
does that have to do with anything?
Are they the same person or not?
This is not what's in dispute.
Are they the same person or not?
Okay, no.
Then why should they not each have an individual liberty? What if they get a divorce?
Because you don't want to set up systems that divide them against each other. That's
well,
a bad
then don't
idea.
marry someone who doesn't want to vote for you, with you. But that's
No, do you understand that like people's preferences change over time, and there could be various reasons in which, if you have a tribal type of mentality, like take abortion for instance. Abortion's a great one. Do you think that it's possible that women, for instance, could hold it against their husband and say things like, "Do this or I'll abort your child"? They could actually do that, right?
yeah, hypothetically, sure.
Yeah, and have
that
done
would be
that.
immoral.
And have done that.
That would be immoral.
Yeah,
and wrong.
but you wouldn't say they couldn't go get the abortion, would you?
But would you say a man can?
But hang on. Answer the question first.
What?
You wouldn't say that they shouldn't be allowed to do that, though, would you?
Well, if it would be disenfranchising millions of other women who aren't in that
No.
situation
That's
and need an
can you,
abortion, then
yes or no, please. You wouldn't say that you would not actually say that they should not be allowed to get the abortion, right?
no, I think everyone should have access to.
Okay,
free
so
will.
even if it were the case that a woman, right, was holding the man basically emotionally hostage with her pregnancy and said, "Do what I say or I'll get an abortion," right? You would not make any claim that she could or could not get that abortion, would you?
I would make a claim that what she's doing is immoral, but I wouldn't make a claim that
And
because
should
one
anything
person is
happen to a
immoral-
woman who does that?
Yeah,
What?
I mean that's blackmailing. I think
It's
that's
not
crime.
blackmail.
I think on a level it's emotional blackmail. I
Yeah.
think you should be able
So
to sue someone
what
for
should happen?
emotional
Should they
blackmail.
go to jail?
I like that concession. I think you should be able to sue someone for emotional blackmail. It would be hard. It would definitely be a interesting level of evidentiary. I can't remember the word, but it would be a high level of evidence for sure. It'd be tough to have that amount of emotional blackmail evidence, but that was a good concession.
I mean, maybe pay damages or a fine.
A fine?
Yeah.
How much should the fine be?
I don't know.
$200?
How
Dude.
much is an abortion?
They'd be the same as an abortion?
Can I ask you a question?
So just
Can
to
I
get
ask
this
you a
right, well, I
question?
want to finish this real quick.
No, can
and
I
then we
ask
can
you a
move
question?
back. Well, no, you can't till I finish the inquiry.
Okay,
but
well,
then
I'm
you
not
can,
going to answer your question.
but then,
until I
but you
ask
can
mine.
inquire back. I
Sure.
just want to finish this inquiry,
Go
the
for
line
it.
of inquiry. That's all. So just to make sure I got this right, you have now said that the tribal voting does indeed pit husband against wife, has a potential to do so, right?
No.
And I've even conceded to
It has the potential to do so, but I don't think that's a super frequent thing that happens. I think most people marry people with similar values, especially societal values. So I don't know how I feel about that.
specific examples of where it would be in a woman's interest to vote against her husband, to have a right to do something which could be used against him later, and then said, well, the punishment should be like, oh, maybe she pays a fine if something like that happens. And how are you going to convince people that that's a better system than one household voting? That's a terrible system.
Because then the leader of that household or the head of that household has control over the right and the will of every single person in that household. You're fundamentally denying people free will. They're
I'm
not
not-
allowed to. Yes, they are. Because if they're both
Fundamental denying of free will,
Uh,
huh?
because if they're both legislated by the same government and one of them has no say in who is elected into that government,
So?
but still, because you're still
They still have
impacted
free
by
will.
law, but you're still impacted by laws.
So what? You're being
Yeah, this doesn't really have anything to do with free will, but there may be a point behind what she's saying, but she's definitely using the wrong words to describe it. So I'm not 100% sure what that point would be. Maybe she'll get around to it.
impacted by laws when you're 17. They can't vote. You have a
Not
consistency
at the
issue.
same extent as an 18-year-old. Not at the same
They
extent as an
can
adult.
have it to the same extent as an 18-year-old.
In very rare exceptions, but you're
Yeah, but they
fighting on
can
an-
then.
but
So
you're
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's a very loose use of the term free will. I'm not really sure what she actually meant by that.
fighting on an
disenfranchising
exception.
people.
But look at you. You're around the fringe. You're fighting on an exception. We're talking about the general population.
Even
right
in the
now.
general
I'm not talking about
population,
murderers. I'm
yeah.
not talking about
So
serial
let's start
killers.
with
I'm not
this.
talking about school shooters.
I don't think it's generally speaking a good idea to let 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds to vote, to disenfranchise the votes of people who are politically informed, because they're being used as a leverage voting block for elitists. And that's what's actually happening. What's actually happening was what you just said. You know, NGOs and lobbyists are lobbying Congress to get various things passed, and what they do is they try to leverage the votes from a tribalist purview in order to get the things that they want, right? And 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds are highly impressionable, right? So are 22, 23, 24, 25-year-olds highly impressionable. And one way that you could eliminate this idea that they could be gone after by the parasitic NGOs who run things is by simply limiting the ability to vote to people who have such a political
Maybe she meant it limits their input on society. Yeah. She should have just stuck with the disenfranchisement term that she was using, because that was more directly applicable. Free will is like a really nebulous thing that I mean, we all kind of have it, but it's always sort of restricted, but you can always just ignore the restrictions. It's a very weird nebulous term to begin with. It's like the concept of rights. It's like, yeah, you kind of have rights, but like you actually don't. It's interesting.
interest that they actually do social service for up to 5 years so that then we can trust them with the right to vote.
Okay, I have two statements. Can you let me get through them?
Sure.
Okay, so here's number one. I agree that lobbying generally is bad. I'm not here for NGOs. I don't think anyone really is. I mean, but the whole point of why we don't like them is because we want to be represented by our legislators fairly and accurately, and we don't want it to be in the control of a private interest group.
So lobbying's bad.
Yes, generally, I think that lobbyists and NGOs are not
bad.
good. But what I don't understand is, if that's the issue, why not ban NGOs? Why not have a platform that's standing against NGOs and lobbyists? I think that'd be something great.
Yeah, so
If you
this
did
is a
that, that'd be
great-
awesome.
Yeah, so this is a great question, but here's the problem, right?
Yeah.
This is the leverage of tribalism and why you can't really do that. So on social issues, right? There are NGOs out there, for instance, who have a vested interest in abortions being legal, right? This goes out into the social ethos, and now we're battling over the social issue. We have become tribal, right? We've become tribal. Then you have NGOs who battle against it, let's say, this social issue. They also are making a ton of money off of the counter battle, let's say,
Yeah.
also utilizing political tribalism. The whole idea here is divisive tribalism is what enables NGOs to begin with. They make a ton of money off of it, especially off of race hustling and DEI.
So then again, why not just ban NGOs and lobbyists?
Yeah,
and
you can't
allow everyone to still have a vote in a representative
I'm giving you
democracy?
the descriptor.
I think it's hilarious that you keep calling democracy tribalism.
It leads to tribalism, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean,
Full democracy leads to tribalism.
Partial democracy leads to tribalism. This whole conversation about tribalism is so pointless. Like, no matter what the political system is, we're always going to organize into groups that have similar ideas or similar geographies, or it's always gonna, you can always apply the tribalism definition to this. This is all kind of like a giant non sequitur. I knew so many commie high schoolers before I graduated who almost immediately changed their mind when they started working. Yeah, I feel like most of the communists settle on just sort of like a regular liberalism, like a capitalist, like a stakeholder capitalist liberalism. She continues to use it very differently throughout the conversation. Yeah, the free will one she keeps using way differently. And it's too nebulous of a term to be using. The disenfranchisement was much more to the point.
There's no way around it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so does sports, sure.
So should we ban sports?
No, why would you ban sports?
Well, that doesn't make sense.
That's a total non sequitur. It makes no sense.
Why would you ban a huge percentage of the population from voting?
Because I would want to avoid political tribalism so that elitists can't exploit low information voters, which they do right now, in order to enslave the planet.
So you're basically saying that people are too stupid to have the right to vote?
Yes.
But in both of the ideas Andrew put forward, the marriage one and the civic service one, stupid people can both do those things. You still have stupid voters. In fact, lower intelligence people might be more inclined to civic duty so that they could get their right to vote, as opposed to high IQ people who would just be able to skip that part and go straight to the workforce and make a bunch of money. So if that's his goal, it just doesn't really make sense, either of the two propositions he's putting forward.
That's dumb, dude.
Don't you agree with that?
Yeah, of course I think people are stupid.
Well, then what are you arguing with me about?
If I want a right to vote, then I should give them the right to vote.
Why? But listen, think about what you just said. Yeah, dude, I agree that people are too stupid to vote, but give them the right to vote anyway.
I don't think people are too stupid to vote.
Why? So they're too stupid to function, but they're smart enough. Oh, come on. You think that people who go and generally cast a ballot are high information voters, or they barely even know what the hell they're talking about?
I mean, do you have a statistic on how many of them are?
Yeah, you could do street polls. A lot of people have no idea what's even going on with the issues. A lot of people are just bused to poll booths. They get bribed to do it. This happens on both sides of the aisle. Like, how many times have you seen canvassing campaigns who go out there and they're canvassing, they knock on doors that people don't even know what the hell they're talking about?
So what, you think we should do an IQ test for everyone to have the right to vote?
That's been suggested, right? But I have a better plan than an IQ test. I would not disenfranchise a person from being able to vote because they have like an average IQ.
Yeah.
What I would do is disenfranchise a person to vote if they were low information. One way I could find out if they were really politically motivated is if they sacrificed years of their lives to the state in order to get that right to vote.
So you want to punish people for being stupid?
Or they just want room and board for 5 years. I mean, that's why a lot of people join the army. It's for either the education, the room and board, along with, job training. There's a whole bunch of reasons that people could do that and have no intention of becoming more informed while they're there.
No, I just don't want them to nullify well-informed votes from people who are smart and on the issues and understand the issues.
But taking away someone's vote would be punishing them in a sense.
It's not punishing them.
Yeah,
It's actually stopping them from punishing themselves and the rest of society because they're easily exploited by social elites.
That's fair. I mean, but why not then just target education? Like, why not then
We
try to
spend
fund
5% of the entire GDP of the United States on education. It's the highest anywhere in the world, and we have some of the dumbest people on planet Earth. Our literacy rate is barely, you know what the literacy rate is.
Yeah, it's garbage.
It's trash. And
Yeah.
we spend 5%, the biggest GDP on planet Earth. We spend 5 total percent of our GDP on education. And you think that education's going to solve the problem of the low
Well, if
information
the
voter?
issue is that people are stupid, help them be smarter.
Well, I don't think it's about the amount of money that we spend on education. I think it's just how we educate is fundamentally flawed. And what we teach is fundamentally misguided. There's all kinds of things that could change with the education system that would make things better without actually changing the amount that we spent on it. I don't think the amount that we spend on it is really that much of a correlation to why we have such a high number of uneducated people in the United States right now.
There's a lot of that
But honestly, the illiteracy thing, wild. I mean, that's like the first thing I learned was how to read. Like, how do you even keep going to school if you're not literate? It just doesn't even make sense. How do you even doom scroll TikTok if, you know, you can't read? Like, where are all these people that can't read? I don't know where that number is coming from, but that one scares me.
is a mixture of genes and environment and nourishment and all sorts of different things. It's like you can't, this whole progressive
Well, if it's
idea,
environment and nourishment,
hang on,
then why not attack
this
those
whole
things?
stupid progressive idea of like, you just can just educate people into whatever it is that it's like, no, you really can't. Like, there's a lot of people who are just going to be fucking janitors, okay? There's a lot of, yeah, okay?
All right.
There's a lot of people who are just going to be fucking janitors and who are just going to be fucking toilet bowl cleaners and who are just going to be fucking bartenders and are really not meant to build fucking rocket ships, okay?
I know, but there's still
Yeah, but none of your solutions are going to just rope in the people that can build rocket ships, Andrew. Come on, you're going to get a ton of janitors. They're going to go into civic service for 5 years and then go back to being janitors that can vote. Like, okay.
subject to laws. They
Yeah, I
still
know,
get a
but
say.
just being
and it's
but
frustrating, but it's just a fact.
Yeah,
if I want
yeah.
free will and they want, and you want free will, and we deserve the right to vote, then they do
No,
too.
you're not eliminating free will by this.
You are,
You're
though.
protecting the rest of society from low information.
No, I have a slight agreement with Andrew on this one because this has nothing to do with free will at all. Nothing at all to do with free will.
Information voters destroying their lives. Like,
Yeah,
do you
but
think
you
really
still
think?
can't
Let me ask you
take
this.
someone else's free
Let me
will
ask you
because
this.
they're
If
stupid.
you were to, yeah, but you're not really doing that. What
You
you're
are.
doing.
A vote is an exercise
No.
in free will.
Let me ask you this: if you had to choose,
Yes.
right, for your family,
Sure.
and you knew that you could move them to a place where there was a bunch of people who were highly informed on political processes in the local community, or you can move them to a place where people didn't give a shit, right? Which place would you prefer them to be?
I would prefer them to be in the higher.
Of course,
Obviously,
right? At
yeah.
the place where the people are the most
Hold on.
informed.
Speaking of which, my mother's calling me. Here, I'm a screener. Sorry, Mom. Love you.
Now, if you were
Mom calling in the middle of a debate. Doesn't mom know where she is? Well, actually, she's like an adult, so maybe she doesn't know. But hi, Mom.
able to, if these people were able to cast votes and nullify all of the votes of you high information voters, right? Wouldn't it actually be better for them and for you to disenfranchise their voting so that you guys could actually vote on political and policy issues that made sense?
Well, I don't think that stupid people are nullifying all of the votes of smart people.
Really?
I
Think
mean,
about what you
all
just
of
said.
them.
Can you
Not
think
all
about
of
what
them.
you just? Do you
Not
think there's
all
more
of
stupid
them.
people or smart people?
Oof.
In this country, yeah, it's probably more.
Okay, so you really
Yeah.
don't think stupid people are nullifying the votes of smart people?
On a certain level, yeah. but
Yeah.
At the
I have because honestly, only about half of people vote anyway, so I have no idea how we would quantify this or figure this out. Like, is it mostly the stupid people that are voting? Is it mostly the smart people that are voting? I have no idea. I don't know how, I mean, I have no idea.
same time, they still deserve free will. I can't.
They
rob
still
someone
have free will.
They don't, because they're still subject to the laws of this
Voting is a
country.
privilege. If you go to Australia and you commit a crime, can you go to jail in Australia?
Yeah,
But you can't vote in Australia, right?
sure.
So do you see how that makes no sense? Like
It
what
does
you're
make
saying
sense,
makes
though.
no
I mean,
sense.
if you travel to another country and endanger people, like that's a threat.
You're not
to
even
public
endangering
safety.
people. If you're just like drunk in public, you can be arrested.
That is a threat to public safety.
No.
Public intoxication is
Look,
a threat to public
that
safety.
doesn't mean you're going to actually do anything wrong, right?
But you could.
Yeah.
I mean, drunken people are habitually more
you
violent,
could break
statistically more
or
violent.
you could break some public ordinance, right? You could break some public ordinance you didn't know about, like you're on a beach, right?
Yeah.
And you're in your shorts, and it was supposed to be t-shirts and shorts, something like this.
Yeah, but breaking public ordinances doesn't lead to jail time.
It does if you don't pay the fine.
Well, then you should pay the fucking fine.
Well, see what I mean, though? So you are subject to those laws,
Yes.
and you are subject to imprisonment based on those laws.
You
And if
should
that's the case, you can't vote in those countries.
Okay, but you're not.
That's a good point. And I think I brought that point up earlier. Like, people on vacation are subject to the laws, but they're not subject to the full integration of the system like we are. It's a little bit different. He could solve the civic duty front by dictating that the ones who are doing it must serve in the branches of government that require civic knowledge. Possibly. I feel like he'd still be now he'd be on the other end losing a bunch of informed voters. And that would be tough. Like, because he was mentioning that it would be like firefighters and EMTs and military people. So it wasn't like people working in the government. I don't know. I don't think he thought this all the way through. Because his original, I've heard him make the claim on multiple occasions that just women shouldn't be able to vote. And that most men shouldn't be able to vote, but definitely women shouldn't be able to vote. And it feels like he's walking that back, but he didn't really fully flesh out the walked back position yet. And I've never heard him make this full argument before. So I feel like he's kind of using this debate as like a test run for this argument. But yeah, I don't know.
You're not a citizen of that country. You're still a citizen of this country. If you were a citizen
That's my
of this
whole
country
point,
and you
though.
live here and you are subject to the
Yeah.
laws of this country for your entire life, from
Yeah.
birth to death,
Yeah.
you should have
Why do you
stake.
want dumb people to disenfranchise your well-informed vote? That makes no sense. Not only that, you say that you're actually emboldening them with their free will, right? It's like, that's so silly, because ultimately, these people who are politically low information, they're so low information, you're allowing them to get taken advantage of.
Of course, I don't want dumb people to disenfranchise my vote, but I don't think that the solution to that is a one marriage voting system or you have to do public service for 5 years.
Give me an alternative.
But can't dumb people do that too? Like, couldn't a dumb person just do some fucking community service for 5 years and then get paid? I mean, like, there are dumb people in the army.
Listen, I agree with you that there can be some
Exactly. Dumb people could do it too. And there you go.
stupid people who get through the system, but they're not going to be probably low information. You're not going to go through 5 years of civil service like that for the purpose of being able to vote and be low information, or you wouldn't do it. You have an interest. That's what the whole point is.
Well, if your housing and your food is paid for, I think there are a lot of people who'd be interested in that. The army. I mean, that's like exactly a
The
version
army,
of
you
civil
have to
service.
take the army. You have to take an ASVAB test, and you have to score X amount of a score in order to even be placed in those things.
Big dog, my boy.
That's a placement test. That's not a whether or not you can get into the army test. Maybe I'm confused, but yeah, but people do that now, kind of. Like, but you get paid to do it now. I don't know. I think just the room and board for 5 years and just not having to worry about anything and then being able to put that on your resume for future jobs, I think that would be a big enough incentive just on its own. So I don't know if they would be inspired to like become informed while they were busy doing this other job. Especially if it's just like firefighter or EMT or military, like he was mentioning. Maybe it would be a higher with the military because like you're fighting wars on behalf. So maybe you would want to become more informed. But like a firefighter, just getting room and board to be a firefighter. I don't know if that would incentivize them to become informed. I'm not sure.
My friend's a vet. He talks about some dumb motherfuckers in the army.
Sure, there's dumb people in the Army.
But so they would
But
be
to
given...
qualify for certain jobs, you can't be. And for civil service or something like this, you can do intelligence tests or things like that.
Okay, so you're basically saying there should be an IQ test, and only those who would like to be civil servants
if you're
who pass that IQ test.
Well, I think you
should
probably implement an IQ test for the military too, which they do.
Yeah, but people suck.
I mean, but they do. But they
do.
do, unless it's in wartime and they're like, okay, well, you just need a body in here.
She right though. There's some dum-dums in the military, so I don't. Yeah.
And then they'll grab anybody off the street. But yeah.
Can we ask about right now? I want to confirm that.
Of course.
Aiden,
Are we getting a boyfriend cameo?
do you do IQ tests for the military?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, man. I know guys in the army who are like mentally.
Wait, you want boyfriend reveal?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Wait. Oh, go. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just go around that
See,
way.
army. No, I'm playing.
Yeah, there are people who are there who are dumb. That's true. But they.
Here, baby, come here first.
If you can,
Yeah.
just kind of like.
I've heard of
Oh,
that.
boy.
It's called a Cat
Right
5
here.
waiver, right? They give them a Cat 5
I'm
waiver.
talking about category 5 waivers. I'm talking about.
Can you just?
Baby, come here.
Shalom.
Not shalom.
In terms of like people in the army and IQ tests, like I've taken the ASVAB, it is not a very difficult test, and a lot of people get their ASVABs taken for them. I knew guys in the army who were like medically diagnosable with mental deficiencies, and were still in the army doing jobs that in theory required a certain level of mental faculty.
Sure. Yeah, the system can get gamed, but those are exceptions, not the rule.
I wouldn't really go that far, to be honest with you. And then also in terms of your,
You don't think the majority of people are stupid or in the army are stupid, do you?
I think that there are a great number of people who join the army because they want a place to live and food, which is the system you just described, and that's pretty much independent of intelligence.
They seem to be joining the army based around patriotism, the
When were
ability
you
to
in the
get
army?
paid, the ability to
When
do
were you
things
in the
like
army,
that.
Ron?
What's that?
When were you in the army?
I was in the army for a very limited amount of time, years and years ago.
How long was that very limited amount of time, if you don't mind me asking?
It wasn't very long, about a year.
About a year. So what happened? 'Cause
Well,
actually,
it doesn't matter what happened.
Oh, but we're talking about service, man.
What about it?
So you want to disenfranchise people based on military service? I actually know why most
Why
people
would?
join the
What are
army.
you talking about? How would I disenfranchise them based on military service?
No, you
It
said
would
you
be the
wanted to
opposite.
disenfranchise those
If
who
you're
Yeah, boyfriend's confused. No, it's okay. Go sit back down.
requiring people to serve
No,
in the
it wouldn't
military.
require them to serve in the army. Literally didn't say that.
I'm sorry about
All
that.
right,
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah, I literally didn't say that.
Thank you for your help. Ella.
Thank you.
Okay.
Readjust this.
So now we've established that people in the army can very much be stupid.
Yeah, they can be. Yes, they can be dum-dums. They're definitely like I know a lot of them, honestly. I will be right back. Give me like 2 minutes.
So
Nobody ever
Thank you,
disputed
Travis.
you can have stupid people
Had to take a quick bathroom break there.
in the army.
okay, so again, we're trying to go
My
back.
question-
we're trying to
yeah.
figure out
So
how
let's see
your
if we
system
can't.
would work
Yeah, so
in
s-
terms of
Yeah.
those who are participating in some sort of civil service.
Yeah, so you would have some
are-
type of civil service, right? Which
Okay.
a person would participate in.
Wow, they've been talking about voting for like 50 minutes. I can't believe they've been talking about this for this long.
For at least 5 years.
5 years.
Oh, hey, we got a Rachel Wilson cameo here. Let's see. Civil competence test, net zero taxpayer, one household vote, anything where you have to prove you've skin in the game. So would it be all of these things? And understand basics of governance? So you'd have to do all of these things. I feel like they just came up with this plan and they haven't really thought it all the way through.
Years.
Yes, unpaid.
5?
Yes, unpaid.
That's ridiculous.
Why? Do you think that the person who participated in it for 5 years unpaid would really want to be politically informed by the end of that? Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
that's
the-
5 years of not having, like, that's 5 years of, like, housing is paid for, food is paid
Service
for.
guarantees citizenship.
So can I ask who's paying for 5 years of millions of people participating in a civil?
Well, chances would be pretty good it wouldn't be millions, or at least not hundreds of millions of people participating in such a system.
so
It'd be
you
a
would
very
like to
low
limit the
demographic.
voting block in this country to less than, there's 430 million people in this country, and you'd like to limit it
Nah,
to less than
330 million.
hundreds of millions.
It's 330 million in the United States, I think. 336 million or something.
Regardless, you would still like to limit it to, I misspoke, my bad, but you
Yeah.
would still like to limit it to less than, you would like to limit it to hundreds of thousands of people?
Yeah.
You think it's fair for hundreds of thousands of people to speak on behalf of 360 million people?
Do you think it's fair right now to have 100 senators do that?
No, but we still vote for the senators.
Yeah,
we
I
vote
know,
for
but
the senators,
do you
though.
really think you're getting...
They don't just
hang
walk
on.
up and say, hello,
Do you,
sir, I would
do you
like to
think
be a
you're
senator.
really
Like,
getting
you're
political...
voting.
Wait, you think you're really getting political representation inside of a state like New York with 2 people?
I don't live in New York, though.
I know, but inside the state of New York, do you...
I don't think he was asking if you live in New York, Naima. Isn't the House of Representatives supposed to sort of like account for that by having it more representative of the population of each state? I mean, I know it's not perfect by any means, but that's kind of like what we agreed to. Like things, I'm pretty sure all things have to go through the House first. I might be wrong. My civics is not 100% up to par. I'm more on the cultural, societal side of things, but
Do you really think the state of New York is getting adequate political representation on Capitol Hill with 2 fucking people?
Well, that's why you have the Senate and the House, and the House. is
2
based on-
people who are your senator. You really think
Every
that
state gets 2 senators.
100 people are representing 330 million people? At the very top, it's 1 person who's representing 330 million people's
So are you
interests.
advocating that we shouldn't have government?
No,
at
what
all?
I'm saying to you is that, like, it's very silly for me to look at an argument like you're making and say, oh my God, 100,000 people are going to be in charge, or 200,000 people are going to be in charge. Like, ultimately, 1 person's in charge.
So you're saying
Ultimately, 1 person's in charge.
but there's still checks and balances. That 1 person isn't a king.
There
They don't
still
have
would be checks and
tyrannical
balances with
monopoly over
limited
all
voting.
Power in the guard.
There's still checks and balances with limited voting.
Yeah, but we still do not get to decide who is in our legislature. As a voting body, we do not get to decide who is
You
in
would
the
still
legislature.
have people from within your various communities who would be voters, and they would decide who it is that went to represent you on Capitol Hill.
That sounds very expensive and very pointless, if I'm being honest.
How is that expensive? Okay, fine.
Because you
Then
have to
if
pay
wanna-
for all their houses.
then if
I think senators should go back to the way it was. Senators used to be picked by the state. I'm assuming you meant state. Oh, okay. Your correction was not the correction. Picked by the state and represent the state, and the Congress represents the people. Yeah, you should see me trying to type words on my phone. Yeah, I'm not entirely opposed to that. Not entirely.
If you want to do that, there's another way you could do this too. If you didn't want to do like the civil service way, you could do 1 vote per household. That would limit the voting significantly. Hang on.
Okay.
And it would be not expensive at all. But
Okay.
there's even another way that you can do it on top of that.
Alrighty,
Right? But let's just start with like 1 household voting.
Okay.
Same thing.
let's do it.
You can eliminate whatever this like perceived cost is that you have. Another thing you could do is just eliminate anybody being able to vote until they reach the same age that they could become president of the United States.
Okay. So 35? That's I don't know. I don't know about that one.
Is that not 35?
Mm-hmm.
So you think that everyone under 35 should lose the right to vote?
Why shouldn't everyone under 35
That
be
was the
able?
most boomer shit I've ever
Why
heard
shouldn't
in my
everybody
life.
under 35 be able to be the president of the United States?
Well, because they don't have the. But there's
While it's not a debate argument, I agree that's some boomer shit.
still.
Why? Answer the question.
Because they do not yet have the experience in politics to run an entire country.
So
but just
yeah,
because you can't
exactly.
okay, Andrew. But just because you can't run an entire country doesn't mean that you should still not have the right to have 1 singular vote. It's 1 vote.
What are you talking about?
Yes, you can't be the president, but you are still susceptible to the laws. You can have a kid at 35. You can have a house at 35.
So,
Like,
what does that have to do with anything? But you can't be president.
below
Can't be
35,
president. Yeah.
legislatively,
Yeah.
below 35,
Yeah.
from 18 to 34, all of these people are impacted at the same level.
No, they're not all impacted at the same level. In fact, I would say.
Can they
I
all
would
go to
say-
jail for committing a crime?
Yes, I would say the
Then
opposite.
yes, they're
I would
impacted
say
as
like
well.
people between the ages of 18 and like 25 are mostly living at home, right? And their parents are the ones who are mostly impacted by legislation, not them. And
That
their
sounds like a
parents.
skill issue.
And their parents should actually probably have more say than them. Their parents actually have more autonomy than they do because they're dependents on them, right? Completely dependent upon them. It's like, if I look at the trends, it seems to me like if you eliminated from 18 to 25 or from 25 to 35, if the founders didn't think you should be president of the United States till you were 35, I don't think they wanted you to vote either. And you know what? That's why it was never law. Voting
Andrew,
rights are affirmed.
This is some old shit.
That's not an
dog.
argument.
This
That's
is
not an
giving-
argument.
Well, I mean, the reason why
Give me
you're
the
saying this is
argument.
because you're young, you're old. Like, you are not applicable to this law.
What did that have to do with anything?
You're trying to govern a group of people that you are not a member of.
So?
That's the issue.
So what?
Everyone should be representative government.
So how old do you think the average person who's in Congress is?
Hella old, and we
they're
hate
representing all of you. What do
and
you
I
mean?
hate that.
So you think that like 19-year-olds are going to be better governing than 60-year-olds?
No, but
Isn't it like 30 to be in like Congress? So like you could be old enough in Andrew's little world that he just created. You could be old enough to be in Congress, but not old enough to vote. That's a little, I don't know about that one. Also, I'm very frustrated by the fact that neither of them have gotten to the actual best refutation of what Andrew's saying, which is that the right to vote being as universal as possible limits the likelihood of revolution. That's the main reason we have it. It's instead of, I don't like the government, I'm going to do a revolution. It's, I don't like the government, I get to vote. That's like the main argument. And neither of them have touched on that at all.
I think I don't think an 80-year-old would be a representative government.
Yeah,
I'm
but
glad Mitch McConnell's
80-year-olds are
stepping down. Too
dying in their
old.
depends. They're not governing. What do you mean?
Yes, they are.
No, they're
Sleepy
not.
Joe.
Sleepy Joe, who is in his 80s, now has cancer, and he's not president because he went off the deep end.
I know.
You're
and Trump is in his 70s, and Mitch McConnell is in his 80s.
Listen,
All of these people
your
are hella
presidents,
old.
your presidents and congressmen are running like between the late 40s to 50s to 60s. You don't really think that replacing them with 20-year-olds is a good idea, do you?
I don't think we should replace them with 20-year-olds, but
Why
I'd
not?
settle for
Why
a
not? Wait,
smooth
why
40.
not? Why not?
Well, they'd have to be elected first.
Yeah,
no?
I know, but even if they were, don't you think that would still probably not be the worst, that wouldn't be a good idea?
If they were elected
Uh-huh.
through a democratic representative democracy.
Don't you think they would do a
would
worse
not have a
job,
problem
though,
with that.
than 40, 50, 60-year-olds would?
Well, we don't know who it is. You can't just say universally, I think a 20-year-old would be worse if they are
Lord.
elected democratically.
Well, why do you think our founders thought that 35 years old was the minimum?
I think the founders thought 35 should be the minimum because you need experience in government to be the head of the government.
No
which I agree
experience in
with.
government is even required to become the president of the United States, 0.
Sure.
So why this age of 35?
Well, because you have to have lived in this country for long enough to understand it on a basic level.
Because they also thought you just didn't have the requisite experience probably in life to govern at all.
That's fair. To govern the entire country, I would say that
To govern
someone under-
anybody?
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
I think so.
Well,
I
then why
mean,
can't
why is it that they didn't let people vote? Why do you think they didn't want people to vote?
I mean, dude, they were kind of fucked up. I mean, do you really want to base all of your beliefs on the founding fathers? They owned slaves. Like,
So?
so.
The whole world owned slaves.
Just because a lot of people do something doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, we were some of the first to take people out of slavery, especially the West.
Pretty sure that was England. France did it second.
The West, then?
That's
The West. England.
that's not America.
That's the West, which is what I said. The
But do you know the
West.
difference? You said we were the first as in America.
The
no?
West is
Oh.
what I said.
I
The
mean, I don't
West.
think we're the same country as England. Sure, we're like
Yeah,
all
but
in
we're
the
part
same
of the
hemisphere.
West, right?
Yeah,
Like
but
England?
We are not run by the same government as England.
Yeah,
we
but
fought a whole
but
war
we're
about
part
it.
of the West, and I said the West is the ones who.
You can't
took
take
us-
credit for something another country did, dog.
Well, first of all, many of the people who came here from England, right? The idea of the repudiation of slavery came from those very
This entire blah, blah, blah. This entire train of thought is just a complete non sequitur.
same dogmas.
What time
So,
is it, Brian, by
so
the
I don't know what you're talking
We're
about.
at 4:30. at the
We're at
moment.
4. Okay, dude, you've just spent the last hour trying to defend the belief that both.
Also, we haven't seen an ad yet. Did this video not get monetized? Interesting.
that both sexes should be somehow disenfranchised from voting. This whole one per household, the one marriage system. And I think fundamentally you have not been able to create an appeal to
Why are
how
we
this
in
would
like
work
closing
practically.
statements here?
Well, because we're supposed to be debating feminism. We never even got to it.
Well, this would be a key component to this actually. But I'm actually fine with this if you want to move it on to that. But here's the thing:
if you wanna
never
keep
made
doing
a
it, we
single
can.
argument.
The argument is that people should be legislatively represented and allowed to vote
Yeah,
in
that's
a
an
representative
assertion.
democracy.
That's just an assertion, not an argument. That's just like, I think so.
The argument is that people are impacted by the laws that
Okay.
legislators
Yeah, she definitely made an argument. She didn't make the best argument. Neither of them even got to the point of the best argument, which I've mentioned a few times already. So I won't get into it again, but she has been making arguments. Whether or not he agrees with them is a whole separate issue.
create, then they should have a say in who those legislators are.
Yeah, but
Whether it's a small
but
say,
that's a
that's okay.
performative contradiction because you said that people who are affected by laws who A, don't live here, or B, are younger than a certain threshold should be
It's not a
disenfranchised.
performative contradiction. It's the point of democracy.
No, it's
is
listen.
that we should be represented by a representative
I
government.
need you to understand this logically, that you're performing a
It doesn't make
contradiction.
sense logically because it's a logical fallacy. You were arguing a logical fallacy.
No, what's the fallacy?
The fallacy is that you're trying to essentially stop stupid people from voting by
That's
making
not
sure
a
that less
fallacy.
people
That's
can
not a
vote.
logical fallacy.
Well, you didn't let me finish the sentence.
Okay.
You're trying to stop stupid people from voting by making it so that less people can vote, which is in turn taking away the power of the voter.
What's the fallacy?
Well, you're trying to empower voters by taking away voters'
Yeah, how
power.
is that a
That's
logical fallacy?
You can't empower voters by taking away their power.
It's not a logical fallacy because the people who could still vote would have their vote would mean more, so they would be more empowered. So it's not a logical fallacy. The actual fallacy would be the prescriptions he's chosen to decide who might be able to vote wouldn't necessarily result in more informed voters. That would be maybe the fallacy there. But it's not what you just said.
How am I trying to empower voters? What are you
I thought the whole
talking
point
about?
is that you're trying to combat tribalism and that you want smart people's votes to
What does
not
that
be
have to do with
nullified by
empowering
stupid voters.
voters?
I thought that's why you're against NGOs, lobbyists, bribes. You want to empower the people.
I don't know what you're talking
So
like.
you just don't want the country
I don't even
to
know
be
what you're talking
represented?
about. What I'm saying
Ooh,
to
he's
you is
getting
that if you want to
grumpy.
eliminate tribalism, you don't want to have nothing but an unlimited amount of people voting where NGOs can mark to the stupid people and bend them to their will and now have that entire bracket for whatever it is their political agendas are.
So again, why not just get rid of NGOs? Why is, oh my God, NGOs are a problem.
Would you
Let's
like
make
to-
sure less people can vote.
Gee, I'd never thought of that. Why don't we get rid of NGOs, the people who are utilizing tribalism so that they exist? Boy, I wish I had thought of that.
You're utilizing tribalism?
No, they're utilizing tribalism so they exist.
Okay, but you're a political pundit. You have the power to help people.
Uh-huh.
Why not promote a stance that is actually useful to them instead of trying to take away their vote?
Great. A stance that would be actually useful to them would be having their well-informed votes not nullified by non-well-informed voters of what you believe and I believe are more than the well-informed voters. That's exactly something I can do to help everybody.
But you're not helping everyone because stupid people still live here.
So what?
They still have a right to exist in a society
Who's
where they are
taking
not
away their
dictated
right
by
to
smart-
exist in a society? Nobody.
Yes, you are, because they're
How?
if they are still held accountable to the
Let's
same
do,
laws, but now have no right or vote or say in who is enacting those laws and who is representing them in government.
Like 17-year-olds?
Final statement from
They're
both of you on
children.
this, if you
They don't
Okay,
pay
yeah, final
taxes.
statement is like her position's a contradiction. She says everybody should be able to vote inside of a country where they are governed by the laws. The problem is that then she says all sorts of people who fall under the criteria of being supported by laws shouldn't be able to vote. It's literally a performative contradiction. Then she moves to my view and agrees with my view that mostly that stupid people outnumber smart voters, and when you're talking about ill-informed voters, that NGOs often take advantage of them.
Blackbeard, you better be good, earn my like. All right, well, I guess it depends on how you define good and what you like. We'll see. They're kind of wrapping up this part of the debate, so
or
We'll see what they
always
get
take
into
advantage
next.
of him. She literally agrees with all of this, but somehow still thinks it's a better idea to allow this to continue because I don't know. She never really gave an argument for that. I don't really actually know why.
My turn?
Yeah, you can respond.
Okay. I mean, I get that you don't understand why, and I get that you don't understand my argument, and I'm sorry. I hope one day you do. But what I will say is, generally, yes, it's annoying that stupid people are allowed to vote, even though they sometimes make poor choices and fight against their own self-interest. Yes, we don't like that. Yes, we don't agree. We do agree that lobbyists and NGOs have way too much power in setting precedents for laws. Those are both things that we mutually agree upon. However, I do not think that it is fair to create a limited democracy that in turn disenfranchises voters on the basis of being stupid. I don't think that there is any way to practically enact that. I don't understand why we would do that.
You could enact it with a constitutional convention. That's how you would do it.
And you don't think that the millions of people who now have lost the right to vote they'd be like, okay.
Travis Guy, all right, Repairman, found you randomly. Got a follow from me. Watch you later. Thanks, Travis. I really appreciate it, man.
Well, they wouldn't have a choice.
I mean, sure. Protests, riots, there's all sorts of ways that people have fought against a government. I mean, would you, like, you're basically trying to call the country's bluff on whether or not they care about having the right to vote, which I think is just stupid. I think personally it's pointless, and I think that the function of a democracy is to make sure that everyone who has to abide by these laws is represented in government. Is that flawed? Yes.
That's not even true. Like, that's
are you going to let me finish? Did I interrupt you?
Let's let her finish, then we're moving on.
Oh, we're moving on.
We're going to move on.
Yeah.
So finish your thing, then we're going to move on.
Okay, so anyway, back to my statement. Yes, this government is flawed. Yes, NGOs have too much power. Yes, it's annoying when stupid people do stupid things. But at the same time, the right to vote is a human right under a representative democracy in the United States of America. To take that away from voters is not the answer to creating a more educated voting body. Like, just genuinely, it's just not.
Okay, so they're done with the voting thing. Thank goodness, because that was a whole hour on who should or shouldn't have the right to vote. Neither of them got to the actual point, which is why we vote. And the reason we vote is because absent voting, if you didn't like what your government or your king or whatever was doing, it was revolution. The answer was rebellion. It was violent revolution. The reason we try not to disenfranchise people from voting is because voting is the alternative to violent revolution. Neither of them got to this point. Andrew came up with a bunch of ways to limit voting, none of which really would result in only having informed voters. Naima kind of kept harping on this point of, like, she did kind of get him with the, like, military and civil service thing, like that. It's not only informed and educated people that would perform that task. So just because they gave up 5 years of their life for free room and board to be a civic firefighter or one of the other examples Andrew gave, that doesn't mean that they would become more informed voters at the end. Neither of them got to the actual crux of voting, though. I think that I wish she had known this, because she could have fought back a little better if she had used that point. Yeah, I don't know. That was a long hour for not really any kind of resolution or very much like intelligent back and forth. But we're gonna get to a new topic now. And but that is, you need to add layers to this. Oh yeah, I do a lot of talking. In my opinion, whatever podcast setting up lamp slaughter, yeah, it's very rare that they have like an actually intelligent opposition, and they definitely do that on purpose.
All right, here's what we're going to do. We have a couple chats that are going to come.
For example, the other 4 debates that happened this week were a disaster. Well, so I think the election where Joe Biden got elected was rigged. There were a lot of claims made. I think it was like 50 something lawsuits that Trump put forth in different states, and all of them were denied on evidentiary claims, except for one. I don't think that one event was enough, but there are a lot of there's a lot of aspects of that we can't really know, like how many people, if any, were non-citizen voting, and there were a lot of other different things like that. So I'm honestly not sure. I feel like every election has some rigging in both directions. I don't know if they cancel each other out. It's kind of hard to tell. So I'm kind of like up in the air on that one. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure there's some amount of rigging happening in any election. I just don't know if it's enough to overcome the opposition rigging, or if it's enough to turn an entire election. I just don't know, and I don't think anyone really knows on that one.
Through, guys, if you want to interact with the stream, the show, the debate,
Let's skip
if you want to
Brian
support
talking.
the slash whatever,
Brian
slash
talking.
whatever.
Wait, he paid $99 to send a message?
Yeah, we have this one coming in from
Damn.
Peacecraft. Oh, the audio's muted. Or actually, it's not muted. I'm not sure why that's not coming
Rick
through.
James.
I'll
I'm
just
Rick
read
James,
it. I have a
bitch.
question for Rick James. If you hadn't eaten breakfast this morning, how would you feel?
The classic "can you answer hypothetical questions" test.
I think that's for you.
Yeah.
How would you feel if you hadn't?
How would you feel if you hadn't eaten breakfast this morning?
I don't. Just how would I feel?
Yeah.
Hungry, probably.
Okay.
Oh,
All right.
she
and
passed.
we have a message here from Jason Cassell related to the military stuff. Thank you, Jason.
Jason Castle donated $200.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Her boyfriend is an ASVAB waiver. You can't get someone else to take the test. You have to be verified with ID, fingerprints, birth certificate, SS, etc. Also, you take it during MEPS.
Is he very
right.
London?
Thank you, Jason, for that
That's
message.
how I remember it. I remember taking it during MEP.
I'm from the UK, so I have no dog in the fight, but I believe after Doge has found 20 million dead people receiving benefits, and then there was 20 million voters missing in the last election. Yeah, it's all very fishy over here. It's all very fishy. I just don't know how much fishiness there was to overcome other fishiness, and what like the equal and opposite fishiness was. It's just all very difficult to measure because so much of it is, well, fishy, you know?
In your singular year in the Army? How did you get off with 1 year?
Well, people get hurt.
Oh, well, that sucks.
That's what happens.
You didn't go back?
We have Red Fox here. In the military, 19 years and run MEPS. All applicants take an IQ test. It is called the ASVAB, and we take significant steps to catch fraud. The armed services on average.
Well, I agree that there can be stupid people who are there. I'm just saying that there are standards which are in place. That's one.
Okay, that's the second time there was like a pause jump in this video where, like, I don't know if a whole line was skipped or something. It's probably nothing, but it's just something to note. I don't know if they're like cutting parts. It doesn't seem like they're cutting long parts, but that's the second time that's happened.
1 and 2. I remember specifically taking it when I was in MEPS. So
how hard would this IQ test be for voters on your whole life?
Well, I didn't really.
Are we gonna
advocate
skip
for
super
an
chats?
IQ
I think we're
test.
gonna
It would
skip
just be- I
super
would-
chats.
You would just be looking for, like, if somebody was going to enter into service, that they had at least the IQ capacity.
Yeah, the IQ testing, we've covered
Let's
that
start
enough.
with
All right.
defining these terms. Can we do that?
Sure, yes.
All right.
So I define feminism, okay, as being a movement towards egalitarianism or equity, okay, with the stated goal of diminishing and eventually destroying patriarchal systems.
That's one definition. It's not everyone's definition, though. That's why I don't like the term feminism. It's just it's too many different contradictory ideas that if you're ever like, I'm a feminist, then you suddenly have all of this baggage you have to defend. And it's like, I don't, I don't believe that stuff. I only believe this little part of it, but it's like, it's all like wrapped up in the same term.
Sure.
That seems to be fairly historically accurate and modernly accurate.
Yes. Movement towards equity, goal of
Thoughts on Andrew Tate? Oh boy. It's hard to say because Andrew Tate's position has changed dramatically over the years. Before he was doing the whole religious arc, it was kind of just the standard, like, fresh and fit prescription. So I like the men should focus on, being fit, being healthy, focus on money, networking, advancing their careers, things like that. The sleeping around and having like some woman as recreational use and stuff like that, I definitely don't agree with. And I mean, now he's doing the whole Muslim thing, and I haven't really kept up with him since then, so I don't really know. He seems to have like changed some positions on some stuff. He's not my personal cup of tea. We'll say that.
eliminating patriarchal systems.
Yes.
Okay, I'll take it.
Okay, so when I say the word going forward enforcer, what I mean by that word is people who utilize inside of society some form of force or in order to either execute laws, right, or keep people safe in some capacity. That would be an enforcer. Okay. So my argument here is that men ultimately are the enforcement arm of everybody's rights, including other men's, and that women always have to appeal to other men, and so they can't actually get rid of the patriarchy, but must instead comply with the patriarchy.
That is very possible that he did the Muslim thing for protection, especially with all the court cases and stuff that were going around. If he did the things that people have accused him of doing, I'm completely against that stuff. But I would always tell any man, like, yeah, you should go to the gym, you should try to be healthy, and you should try to find a career and a position that puts you in a decent place in life where you can take care of yourself and possibly a family. I personally recommend the trades. I do HVAC during the day specifically. And within like it's 1 year of school, and then if you really work hard and you're good at it, you can be making 6 figures after 4 years. I don't know about the whole like crypto stuff, but I don't know if he specifically is like a big proponent of crypto. That just might be like tangentially related people that are kind of in the same circles. Now, as for what we're watching, they're doing force doctrine right now, which I have a feeling she's going to get hung up on, because this is where they all fall apart.
Okay.
That's my argument.
Sure. Do you want to repeat that for me just so I can take a little note?
Yeah, that women, basically feminists always have to appeal to the patriarchy for rights no matter what. And so feminism isn't even possible. It's not even a possibility.
Okay.
This is true because she just agreed just a minute ago to Andrew's definition of feminism, which included the removal of patriarchal systems from society. There are definitions of feminism that do not require or advocate for the dissolution of patriarchal systems in society. If she had disagreed with Andrew and proposed a counter definition, then she would have a defensible position here. She may have just dug herself into a hole, though. So we'll see. We'll see how she combats this. She's been decent so far. She's done much better than the other 4 people that he debated this week. They were a disaster. It was bad.
Fail to picture your for it. Okay. So can I ask, do you believe that free will is a privilege? Or a right or a privilege? Do you believe free will is a right or a privilege?
Does free will just mean do whatever you want?
Within the extent that you're not hurting yourself or others or becoming a danger to society.
Well, then, yeah, it sure sounds like you're saying it is.
I'm sorry, what?
Then it would be trivially true that it would have to be if you're saying that.
Why is she going back to the free will thing? Free will is such a nebulous, it's kind of a nonsense term, which we already covered before, so I won't get too into it again, but it's just such a broad, vague term. I don't know. Like Andrew said, yeah, it's like trivially true if you define it that way, that it's like a privilege in the United States, I guess. But it's like, it's such a wacky term that has way too broad of a meaning.
That means you can do whatever you want unless A, B, C, and D, then it would have to be a privilege.
Well, okay. So free will, as I'm defining it, is the right to do with you what you want so long as you are not infringing upon another's free will.
Then it would trivially have to be a privilege.
It would have to be a privilege.
Like, by that logic, there would be no way around it. It would have to be a privilege.
Why would it have to be a privilege?
Well, because the second you do infringe on someone's whatever, right?
Yeah.
Do you have free will?
Well, yes, to an extent. Okay, so free will with some limitations. Let's say, is free will with the limitation?
Then it's not free will.
Well, what do you want to call it, Andrew?
I mean, I would just maybe will.
Okay. Do you think that human will is a right or a privilege?
I'm not trying to figure out what you mean by this. Human will.
Like, do you think that we as a society...
How about maybe I can just do it this way? I don't believe that human beings have inherent rights.
Okay. Thank you. There we go. Human beings have no inherent rights.
Excuse me. That's true. Rights are a social construct. They're kind of a nonsense idea. It is a scientific fact that women make choices based on feeling and men logic, which is why the entire podcast is set up to make the other side fail. This is kind of true in generalities, but Brian is very particular about picking specifically, like, not very intelligent woman. Like, it's very rare that he brings on a woman that's like a actual professional debater or someone who really knows what they're talking about. Like, he does this intentionally. There are a handful of women in the space that can hold their own against people like Andrew. I think Naima's been doing a much better job than 99% of the women that I've seen on here. She's missing some points still, but she has been at least attempting to come up with like a coherent actual argument against the things that he's been saying, whether they're correct or not. As soon as you drop 10 women and 10 men on a remote island, everyone defaults to type. Yeah, I've seen that experiment before. It doesn't really go very well. It's usually a mess.
Yeah, correct. I think instead, what we call rights are actually just collective intuitions, which are appeal to force, and then force enforces them.
Okay, so all law, are you trying to say that basically all laws are enforced through force, or just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
generally?
So all laws ultimately.
All laws are enforced by force. Okay.
Yeah. So if you think about this,
True.
the way that I would say is like, do you agree with me that rights themselves are a social construction?
I mean, not really.
Oh, what? Is she gonna do like a natural law argument? Because that's just insanity. She has to agree that rights are social constructs. All right, let's see what she's gonna say.
So my right to own a gun is not a social construction.
Yeah, but I'm talking about free will, not like human, like. Yeah.
What is that? Well, I don't understand though. Like you being able to act in will, I wouldn't dispute with. Like you
Yes,
can,
that's what I'm saying.
you can take actions with your will, but when you say rights, you're saying that those are privileges absent duties. That's a
Okay.
right, and then a duty, right, would be essentially the opposite of what a right is, right?
Yes.
Okay, so these privileges that you're talking about, I think if that's what a right is, a privilege absent a duty, then they all seem like they're privileges.
Okay, but like you don't think that. I guess my issue with this argument is that it's claiming that power is based solely on force.
Yes.
Which to me seems like it's advocating on behalf of violence
I mean,
in order to enforce
in a
and
wo-
maintain
well, yeah,
power.
that's what force would be. Raw force would be violence.
Okay.
So that's what it does. Like we advocate that police be able to use violence in order to enforce laws, right?
But we would prefer that they avoid it, right?
Yeah.
But even if they don't use force, oh, Naima, why? Or Naima, I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce her name. I think it's Naima. Even if the police don't use physical force in the moment to enforce the law, the threat of force is what is actually allowing them to not use force in those situations. So even if there isn't like a active physical force present in the specific interaction, it's still based on the idea of force.
Like
But ultimately, what makes people comply? The threat of violence, right?
Exactly.
But there are other ways to get people to comply, no?
Yeah, but what if they don't?
Well, I mean, yes, but I feel like that's a bit of an extreme. Like,
No, it's not a bit of an extreme that people don't comply.
but how does the president have power? He can't threaten violence
That's
against every
all he
single
does.
member.
He is the commander in chief of the United States military.
But he can't threaten so basically, you believe that we function in a society solely because if we don't, we will be violently hurt by the military.
What? No. I believe that that all of your privileges that you have in society that you're calling rights only actually exist because of force, the idea of force and force doctrine, and that is basically 100% men who provide that.
Okay, so you're kind of giving this like might makes right argument.
Just make.
No. Oh, okay. He was about to say it, but it's not might makes right. It's that might makes. It's just a is claim, and it's true. Every right you have, every privilege, everything is enforced by the enforcement arm of society. That's where your rights even come from.
Makes, not makes right.
So just might is right.
No, just makes, not makes right. Right would be a prescriptive ought claim for morality. I'm making a descriptive claim, which is that descriptively might makes.
So do you not believe that violence is immoral?
Of course not. Depends on the circumstance.
You generally just don't believe that violence is immoral.
It depends on the circumstance.
I mean, violence in an attempt to control others and usurp
Again,
their
that depends on
ability.
the circumstance. I think there's plenty of times where you and I would agree that using violence to control others is totally acceptable.
I feel like violence is necessary in self-defense and the
No, you
defense
don't.
of
You think
someone
that
else.
violence is completely acceptable to control prison inmates, probably to to execute certain laws and search warrants, to do all sorts of things.
Violence is necessary. Again, those are both actions in self-defense or defense of others.
How is that?
If
when
two
you say,
inmates are fighting,
when you're
and
saying
trying to break
using
up that fight so that one of them
violence
doesn't
to,
die,
but it's violence to
that would
control
be-
others, right?
but it would be in defense of others.
Yeah, but it's still to control
Yeah, and in defense of one, you're controlling the other one. Yeah, she's falling apart on this one.
others.
It's in
But this happens with all of any feminist that agrees with the full deconstruction of patriarchy. This is where it falls apart. And it's like, I don't get it, because you can acknowledge patriarchy and the force doctrine and still advocate for women's rights. Like, you don't have to package these things together, because when you try to package these things together, it just doesn't work, because you have to say crazy things like violence is just wrong if you're controlling people, and that's just categorically not true. She doesn't even actually believe that.
defense of others.
Okay,
though.
what if those people, like inmates, don't want to be defended?
So that's what we're talking about. Well, I mean, if someone is beating another person to death, I'm sure that the person
If
who's
it's mutual
dying,
combat, they both want to do it. The guards then go and break it up. They're
They want
definitely
to
using
die?
violence for control. Not die, but fight.
Okay, but if someone is beating someone else to death, and you are
Yeah,
using
but that's
violence
not.
to prevent
See,
that, then
you
you're
see
using
how
violence.
you negate the claim, so you move to the next claim. Can
not
two
negating the
people
claim.
be fighting and then you use violence to break that up?
Yes.
Okay, great. So then you can use violence to control people, and it's perfectly acceptable.
It's not acceptable though, because it's the reason it's acceptable is because it's in defense of another person.
Those people want to fight. Who are you defending?
If one of them is dying, or if one of them is
One
very
of them
badly
is not
hurt,
dying. They
you are
just
defending.
want to fight. They're not dying, but they just want to fight.
Okay, sure. So two prison inmates, but again, you're using these like really, really, really stringently specific.
Yeah, because if we go too broad and too general, then if we hone it down, then I can negate your stance, because what you're saying doesn't actually make logical sense.
But you're honing it down to a specific example that is not representative of the entire population of the United States. I feel like we should use an example.
What
that
is
less-
representative of the entire population of the
I have absolutely no idea what that sentence she just said means. I have no idea.
Not
United
two
States?
prisoners who choose to fight to the death.
Well, what
I mean,
is-
that's the furthest thing
No,
from
no,
the truth.
but when you make a claim, you make this claim. You say, Andrew, violence is only just, or violence isn't justified to control groups of people. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't really believe that, because I can give you examples of groups of people who you would want to control with violence, and you think it's totally acceptable. And you're like, yeah, that's true.
Well, those people have
Hey,
lost
but
the
hang
right
on,
to
but
free
hang
will
on.
by committing
But
a
hang
crime.
on, you go, yeah, that's true, but, right, I still now don't want to use that example. It's like, that makes no sense. It's a refutation to your position. That's why I hone in on it.
Okay, so people, we know this through the Constitution, essentially relinquish their right to free will by threatening the free will of others. That's why prisoners are allowed to go to jail, and that is constitutionally accepted. Yes.
Say that, let me make sure I got that right.
Yeah, but you're still controlling people. This doesn't make any sense. This whole line of, oh, I wish they would just acknowledge force doctrine and then get to the next point. Every single person that debates this gets totally caught up on this. And if they just had a little bit of like a understanding of philosophy, they could work their way around this. Yeah, it's ideologically driven. It's totally like, I need this outcome, so I've worked my way backwards to my argument. And that's not how it works. Like, that's not how functional ideas work. You can't start with a conclusion and work your way backwards. It doesn't work. And she's exemplifying that right now.
Right, say that again?
People essentially relinquish their right to free will, the right to walk around and be free in society as a prisoner, because they have committed a crime that is a danger to themselves or others and threatens
That's
the
incorrect.
fabric of society. So why do people go to jail? Why are crimes crimes? Why are things that are bad?
People go to jail because we force them into jail after they commit crimes, not because they're willingly going to jail for
I
their
understand that they're
crimes.
not willingly going to jail, but what I'm saying is the forced relinquishment of free will in this instance is morally acceptable because they have committed a crime that threatens themselves or others.
Yeah, I'm not disputing whether or not it's moral. That would make my point for me, though.
So I'm not trying to talk about those who have already had their free will relinquished on the basis that they have committed a crime that threatens themselves or others. I'm trying to talk about people who are not criminals, who have not relinquished their free will, who are here in this country and deserve the right to choose what they do with themselves and their bodies. Now,
Okay, well, I mean,
back
you're making a
to-
lot of suppositions there that I just kind of like don't agree with.
So you don't think that people deserve the right to bodily autonomy?
No.
What makes someone deserve
Oh, neither do you, Naima. You don't believe that.
the right to bodily autonomy?
Well, when you say bodily autonomy, would you agree then that a fetus has bodily autonomy?
I'm talking right now about human beings.
Well, I consider those human beings, though.
I'm talking right now about people who can talk and walk, who are independent, singular organisms.
So people who are in comas, they have no rights?
Dude, you keep doing comas and prisoners and fetuses. Just talk about a fucking person. What about
that
you
is a
and me?
person.
Just talk about a person who is not an exception, who is not in a medical state of physical.
Yeah, but what we're trying to determine right now is the worldview. You say people deserve to have bodily autonomy. And then you give me the criteria for bodily autonomy, and then I can instantly point to an example where you agree
That's
that
not what we're trying to do. What you're trying to do
am I
is
trying to
create
do?
a gotcha so you don't have to answer the genuine question that I'm asking.
What's the
you.
genuine question you're asking?
The question is, do people, regardless of outliers,
Mm-hmm.
does the average person who has not committed a crime, who is not inside of another person, who is not brain dead or in a coma, deserve bodily autonomy?
Depending on what you mean by that.
Bodily autonomy being defined as the ability to choose what you do with your body so long as you are not threatening other people's bodily autonomy.
No.
Why not?
Because I would say that things like laws against unaliving yourself would be completely appropriate and things like this, which would be a violation of your bodily autonomy by your criteria.
So you think that because people can't unalive themselves?
No, I'm saying you gave me the criteria for what bodily autonomy means, right? You asked me what an objection would be against it, and I just gave you one.
Okay, so let's cut out that outlier. Do you think that people who are not inside another person, who have not committed a violent crime against themselves or others, and who are not currently brain dead and are conscious and capable of perceiving the world, do you think that those people deserve bodily autonomy?
No, based on the
Why
example
not?
I just gave you.
Just because people have the capacity to unalive themselves, no one deserves bodily autonomy.
By the definition that you just gave, we could not give them bodily autonomy definitionally by that definition because
Definitely by that definition.
definitionally by that definition, yes. So I could say definitionally by some other definition, but I'm giving you the referent to your definition.
We don't deserve bodily autonomy.
Not by your
because-
definition, because that would prevent us from preventing people from like doing suicide and things like this.
So we don't deserve bodily autonomy because under my definition of bodily autonomy, we cannot prevent someone from killing themselves.
Correct.
But that's not a violent act. Like why
Yeah,
can't,
that's a real
but why
violent
can't-
act.
Why can't, under my definition, you can't prevent someone from killing themselves?
Because it would violate your rule for what bodily autonomy is.
I said so long as you are not a threat to yourself or others. So that includes you. So you would relinquish your bodily autonomy if you were a threat to yourself.
Then I think that it would then just be trivially true that you don't really mean bodily autonomy anymore, because what you do is you say bodily autonomy with all of these exceptions where we can violate bodily autonomy.
But that's like 3 exceptions. It's exceptions that
It's not like 3 exceptions,
Exist.
it's many exceptions. What about somebody who's just like cutting themselves with a razor blade? Can we stop them? What about a person who just says that they want to cut off their right arm because they think it'll be fun? Can we stop them? Like There's so many examples I can give you of where we would violate people's bodily autonomy. What about a person who's having like a manic episode and doesn't want to go to the hospital? Can we violate their bodily
Well,
autonomy?
they're a threat to themselves or others. So again, that would fall in there.
What if they're not a threat? What if they're just having like a manic episode? They don't want to leave their house. You just perceive it that way.
That happens all the time. Those are homeless
Exactly.
people,
So
and they do have
we
bodily
violate
autonomy.
whatever you consider by your definition bodily autonomy. When you say people deserve that, and I say absolutely not by that definition, because I can point to 300 different reasons why we would need to violate it.
So is there any definition of bodily autonomy that you think that
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of a definition of bodily autonomy I would agree to that I wouldn't think we should be able to violate.
So you don't think that people should have the ability to control themselves and their bodies under any circumstance because
I didn't say under any circumstance.
So what's the circumstance in which people should have the right to control their body?
Yeah, so, well, for me, I would say that if it's in some type of case of will, that you could do that. But I mean, ultimately,
You mean
I
like
think
free will?
Yeah, no, in case of will. So I'm not sure that I believe in some universalized right for bodily autonomy. And you haven't really given me.
And she's, neither does she. Like, if there's 40 billion exceptions, then you don't believe in it either. And it's kind of like a nonsense idea to begin with. Like, yeah, we have some level of bodily autonomy, but it's not like universal and all encompassing. No one would ever actually think that.
Any definitional reason why I should.
But
here.
I don't understand why you don't believe in bodily autonomy. Why don't
Because
you believe in bodily
my
why don't
understanding
people
of
have
what
the right to
bodily
control themselves?
autonomy is that you basically have the right to do whatever you want absent the infringement of somebody else's bodily autonomy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why don't you think people should
Because
have the right
I
to do
think that I need to many times infringe on people's bodily autonomy for their good or societies.
that? Why are you constantly infringing on other people's bodily autonomy? What are you up
What
to?
do you mean?
What you just said, I feel the need to.
Yeah, well, I would use force doctrine for that, meaning voting, things like that, to violate bodily autonomy.
When are you forcing
When I
yourself
go
onto others
vote.
to bodily?
I'm forcing my will when I go vote on other people through force doctrine.
No, you're not, because they all have a vote.
Great, can I vote
mean,
it-
not according to
Okay.
you, but
I can vote and you can vote, right?
yes,
Okay, you want abortions to be legal?
yes,
If I vote against that, am I voting against your bodily autonomy?
yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we move on now?
No, we can't move on now.
No,
because
we
you still
can't move on?
haven't
Okay.
Well, Andrew, you still haven't explained why humans don't deserve bodily autonomy. Like,
Oh, he just did, though. Come on. You're smarter than this. I think you're smarter than this. I might be wrong. You seemed smarter than this at the beginning of the conversation.
what are
I
you
just
saying?
explained it to you.
So then who should control people?
Well, in this case, we would use groupings of laws under, from my view, it would be like Christian ethics. From your view, it would be like, I don't know, shared bizarre intuitions or whatever, where you think that, I don't know, well, I don't know where
Why
it
are
is that
guessing
you,
what I believe? Stop
do
it.
you believe in God?
I'm on the fence about
Then
it.
it's just intuition. So everything that you believe is probably just
So
intuition.
you believe, well, I mean, there's also facts and like physical evidence.
There are refutations to this, but they're really, really complicated, and she definitely doesn't have the philosophical background to make them. She's gonna flounder through this entire force doctrine thing. I mean, she already has.
But so you believe
Facts and physical evidence require an interpreter, right?
like eyes and ears.
They
and a brain?
require you to interpret them.
So you're saying that facts are different for everyone, regardless of how they interpret.
Well, they require an interpreter, and the interpreter can interpret them however they choose, and then can make moral prescriptions based on those. But when we get to the moral prescriptions,
Facts don't change based on your.
but your
personal
moral
perspective.
prescriptions based on the facts do. That's
Okay,
why they're
sure.
they require interpreters. So I'm not really willing to kind of cede the
Every
ground.
fact, but you are
Yeah.
your own personal interpreter now.
Yeah, I interpret things correct. Yeah.
Yes, okay, and so do I. That's
Yeah, I
how
know, but I
facts
just
work.
don't.
We all see
but I-
facts and then we make
Yeah,
our
right,
own
but I
conscious
haven't-
judgments about those facts.
Right, but I have an
based on
epistemic
how our brains work.
foundation that I appeal to for foundational morals. You don't. You would
So
just
you think
appeal
that
to
everyone should
intuition.
have to subscribe to the Christian God, and that is who decides who has free will?
I think that Christian ethics.
I'm confused as to what that
We're
has
not
to do with
even.
Okay, that's the third time that's happened. Just like a random jump skip in the middle of the, like, what is Brian cutting out?
We weren't talking about free will.
Okay, so then what
We're talking about bodily autonomy. Now,
Okay, so then based on
your definition of bodily autonomy,
Yes.
the one that you gave me,
Sure.
we would definitely need to violate it, and you even agree to that. So,
in what? Just for abortion or what?
no, for the purpose of like suicide, cutting yourself with razor blades, all sorts of various things that you could do to yourself for self-harm that we would step in and violate your bodily autonomy over.
Okay, so outside of those specific examples in which someone is committing an act of harm, which I also removed from my definition of bodily
Then
autonomy.
I don't consider that bodily autonomy anymore by your definition. Your
Okay.
definition would have to be something
Dude,
different
like the
than
right
your
to go to
definition.
the fucking grocery store. Who has that right? Who are you saying under your standpoint of government, what is it based on your equal force objection
So-
can women do
Yeah.
that they should not be allowed
So
to
let's
do?
untangle some ideas. When you say who has a right to go to a grocery store, who has an inherent right to go to a grocery store, or who has a physical right enforced by men to go to a grocery store? Which thing are you asking?
What do you
An inherent right or some external subjective right?
Well, there's no such thing as inherent rights. So if she answers inherent rights, then she already lost this line also.
That is enforced. Which thing are you asking?
I'm saying who has an inherent right to
Nobody.
move their body in the way that they
Nobody has an inherent right to do anything.
Nobody.
Nobody has an inherent right to do anything.
So then how do we gain the physical right to go to the grocery store?
Through force.
Exclusively through force.
Yeah, the only reason that so if let's say the Taliban took over the grocery store area, do you have the right to go to the grocery store now?
No, but that's an anarchic society.
Then you're agreeing with me. So then you're
I'm
saying
not
there's
agreeing
no
with you.
inherent right.
It sounds like you're advocating for anarchy, and the only way that
I'm
people
not advocating
gain a
for
right-
anarchy.
The only way that people gain a right is through force. Then we'd all be fighting each other all the time.
No, see, she is making a natural rights argument, which would actually be the libertarian anarchist argument. He's doing the opposite.
To gain the right to just
No,
use
we
our
don't.
bodies
You can
in a basic way.
cooperate for the purpose of force doctrine. We do it constantly. What do you mean?
No, we don't, because we don't live under a force doctrine principle.
Yes, we do.
Well, how would old people have the power to do anything? How would disabled people have the power
Because
to do
they
anything?
have-
If no one can defend themselves
Because they
through
have
force.
people who have force, which enable them to do those
What?
things. That's how.
So then there is power that comes not from force. If people who do not have the power to force can utilize the strength of others on their behalf.
The strength of others would be force.
Okay, but how did that person at the top who doesn't have force utilize the strength of others?
He's utilizing other people's force.
Okay, but what is he doing to utilize their force? Because he somehow has power over them. How?
He doesn't have, well, it's agreed to power. But the thing about power dynamics, which is interesting, is that if you have control over force, if that were to shift, like let's say the president said some shit that you really didn't like, and a big ass mob showed up to take him out, right? And nobody opposed that, who has force doctrine on their side?
That's fair. So I want to go back to this claim. You said
Hang on.
agreed to-
Before we go back to
No,
my claim,
You said agreed
hang
to
on.
powers
I want
based
to
on force.
Wait.
And I would like to just ask.
Hang on. You said that's
if-
fair, though, right? You said that's fair.
No,
You said that's fair.
I'm responding to the words you're saying. If you said agreed to power based on force,
Yeah.
and that those who are disabled are protected and their will is protected, and those who are elderly are protected and their will is
If
protected.
there's force, yeah.
Then why can't you do the same thing with women? Why do women now usurp their right to protection and bodily autonomy under a...
There's not rights.
force
These aren't
action.
rights. It's just force. Can
It is a right.
Can women manipulate men to use force on their behalf? Sure, that's
Yeah.
happened before.
Okay.
Great. But they're always going to have to appeal to men's strength for force, no matter what.
But I don't think society is intrinsically and implicitly governed by force, and I think advocating for that
Which
is
part
creating
of society?
more violence.
Which part of society is not governed by force? Which part?
I mean, schools aren't governed by
Yes,
force.
they're
People
governed
go to
by force,
school
for
because
sure.
Really? So kids go to school because they're afraid they're going to get...
No, they're not going
hurt
to
and
school
beat
because they're
up if
afraid
they
they're
don't
going to
go
get hurt. But there's security guards who are around. There's police officers who are around. There's people who enable that nothing bad's going to happen to those kids. There's teachers who are there much stronger than the students to keep potential threats away from the students. All of it's governed by force.
Okay, but you're talking about force for protection versus
Yeah.
force for the utilization and monopoly of
It's
power.
all the same thing.
It's not the same thing.
Same.
If you're protecting people's right to be somewhere, then that is a different use of force than...
But they're both force?
Sure.
Okay, great. Then they're the same thing. Force.
Sure.
Okay,
But why are you, just because you have a monopoly on force, what gives you the will to usurp someone's right to very basic bodily autonomy.
They don't have rights. Rights are not, by your agreement, inherent.
So then what's to stop a bigger, stronger man from just beating the shit out of you? And now you don't have rights.
Nothing except force doctrine. That's the whole point.
Then why would you want to live in a society in which everyone is like
I didn't say
dependent
you
on
have to
force?
live in a society in which individuals can get beaten up by somebody who's next to
But
them.
that's what force doctrine is.
No, force doctrine would be like the cops would show up and beat that guy down with billy clubs, drag his ass to prison. Then he would get thrown into prison where guards would make sure he stayed there.
Okay, so
that's
what
all
kind of force is appropriate through force doctrine?
Well, I don't even know what that means. What are you asking?
So the force and the power to, I mean, you're basically saying that women do not have the right to, I don't know because you won't define what rights are, to do really anything.
Okay,
because
I'll tell you
men
again.
can-
What did I say a right is? A duty. Oh, I'm sorry, a privilege absent a duty, and you agreed to it 4 times.
So women have no privilege
Hang on,
absent of a duty.
Stop. I just want to point out your lie. You said I
So frustrated.
you said I keep lying, or you keep lying. So
When
like,
did I lie, Bookie?
You just lied and said that he wouldn't define what a right is. And now you're like cackling and acting crazy for no reason.
you just said I never defined privilege.
No, I didn't.
Yes,
Oh,
you
yeah.
literally just said that, and I defined it 4 times.
You didn't say you didn't define privilege. You didn't define privilege. You defined a right. Those
Oh
are
my God.
different words.
A privilege absent duty is what?
A privilege absent of a duty. I'd say like free will.
A right.
essentially.
It's
Yeah.
a right. I defined it multiple times.
So what are you trying to say? That because women cannot defend physically their right to do things, that they do not deserve rights? Is that the point?
They can't enforce their own rights. So they
Okay,
have to
so
appeal to
because
men.
someone cannot enforce their own rights, they don't deserve rights.
Well, they don't have them.
But do they deserve them?
Well, again, then you're moving into a different claim. So if you want to get into like what people deserve or don't deserve, right? We can get into that, but can we at least agree on the descriptor of how it works first?
No.
Okay.
Because women, I'm trying to understand why women don't deserve rights because they cannot
That's
physically.
a different claim.
It's geez, does she not understand the difference between is and ought claims? He's explained it so many times.
I just asked you if we could agree to the descriptor before we moved to that claim, and you said no, and then brought that claim up again.
Because the claim doesn't make sense. I don't understand your claim.
Okay,
Make the claim,
and I'm
then we can
literally
debate it.
answering all of your questions for this claim.
Not well, though. Like, what are you saying?
Which question? Which thing am I not answering?
If women do not have a monopoly on force, cannot control their own bodies, why don't they deserve basic human rights, basic equal rights?
Okay, let's try this again. It's like
Okay.
talking to a fucking child. Okay, do you agree with me?
No.
Okay. Do you agree with
I've
me?
never seen you this pissed off. This is fucking hilarious. Oh my
I'm
Oh my God, you are not dunking on him right now. You look insane right now.
not pissed off. I'm just.
Yes, you are. And they
No.
say women are emotional. Look at him.
You're the one freaking out, not me.
I'm not freaking out. I think this is hilarious.
For me, it's extremely frustrating talking to someone who doesn't
That
actually
sounds like an
understand
emotion.
the words that are coming out of my
You're
mouth.
sounding very emotional right now, Andrew.
Can we go
Would
back?
you like to get some water?
Yeah, can we go back and go through
If
all
you need
of
to cry, that's
these-
okay.
Can we go back
I'm
through...
here for you, my friend.
Can we go back through these descriptors now?
Sure.
Okay.
Alrighty.
What is a
You
right?
just want to keep defining words?
What is a
Fucking
right?
Merriam-Webster over here.
What is a right from your perspective?
Okay. I mean, I'm fine with your definition on those descriptors.
No, but I want your definition.
I'm fine with your definition of
Then why do you keep contradicting yourself if you're fine with my definition?
that. I'm not contradicting myself. Your claim just doesn't make sense that humans do not deserve rights specifically because they
He hasn't made that claim at all. He never made that claim. Not one time.
cannot physically
When did I
defend
say
them.
they didn't deserve them?
You just did, like
I said
4
they
times.
don't exist inherently, right?
Okay, so whether or not it doesn't exist inherently, does someone still deserve that right? Just
They
because
don't-
they cannot
they-
physically defend themselves.
How do you deserve something that doesn't exist?
But it does exist.
Okay, so now it exists. Does it exist or not exist?
I mean, do I have bodily autonomy currently? Yes. Can I go walk around my house and do what I want? Yes. So on a certain level, it does exist.
Where?
I mean, right here, right now, I'm here on my own free will.
So because you can do this,
pissing you the fuck off.
So because you can do this, you have the right to do this?
I'm trying to see what extent you think women should not be allowed to do things because they cannot monopolize and control
but
others based
do
on
you
force.
understand that, like...
I just don't understand practically what you want out of this.
When
so women can't force men.
It's hard to argue with you because you don't have any understanding of philosophy at all. So when I bring these things up...
That's not the issue. The issue
That is the issue. That is 100% the issue. 100%.
is that your philosophy is inherently flawed. It morally doesn't make sense.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Negate it. Negate the proposition.
Okay, sure. With what I said before. So you're basically saying that people who utilize force to execute laws are those who have the ability to control those laws. My issue is that, and in terms of a movement towards equity or a goal of eliminating, and in terms of feminism, you're saying it's a movement towards equity with the goal of eliminating patriarchal systems. My issue is that I fundamentally do not believe that laws should be exclusively enforced to the benefit of those who have physical power.
Okay. That's not a negation of force doctrine. So, like, I don't know what to... You're so philosophically illiterate that you actually don't even understand what I'm saying to you.
And you're just regularly illiterate. I mean, dude, then just argue the claim.
I did argue the claim.
But it doesn't make sense.
Then falsify it.
Okay, just because someone can do something does not mean that they ought to do it.
Okay,
just
so then
because men can force women to do what they want doesn't mean that they ought to.
So then descriptively, do you agree with force doctrine?
I mean, I believe on a blanket, I believe on a smaller level. I think that interpersonally, someone can use force if they have more force over someone.
Okay, let's try this. What is force doctrine?
Force doctrine is your whole thing that men have a monopoly on force and human beings have no inherent rights. All laws are enforced by force and violence is used to maintain societal regularity on a certain level.
And that women have to appeal to men for their monopoly on force in order to secure their whatever needs or rights or whatever it is they want, right? That's part of force doctrine?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, do you
by
agree?
Your definition.
Then do you agree with the description? Do you agree the description is true?
I already said I agreed with the description. That's why I want to argue your claim.
I asked you 4 times if you agreed with the description of force doctrine.
And I said I agreed with it 4 times. Well, one time I said no to piss you off. But then the other times I said yes.
So you agreed with me that when it comes to force doctrine, you agree to the descriptor being true.
Sure.
Okay, now we can get somewhere maybe.
That's what I said. Oh my God.
I mean, you never did, but okay.
I did, Andrew.
So now that we can get past that, now that you've agreed to force doctrine, can you tell me why men should enforce women's rights?
Why men should enforce women's rights? I don't necessarily think that... I think that free will is honestly a privilege. I mean, not a privilege. I think that free will is a right.
It has literally absolutely nothing to do with what he just asked you.
I think that everyone has the right to bodily autonomy.
Then you don't agree to force doctrine. Why'd you lie to me? Why did you lie to me?
You asked me if I agreed with your definition. I agree with your definition of it. I don't morally agree with it. That's what I'm saying.
Well, if we don't agree with the descriptor, then we have to argue the descriptor until you either falsify the descriptor or agree with the descriptor. It can't be either or. It has to be either or. It can't be anything else. It's either true or it's false.
I just want to understand your moral justification for controlling someone else's body. I'm talking on a moral basis, not that you can't physically. I understand that you can physically. I agree with the premise.
That's nice,
but I want you to defend why morally
but I asked you
acceptable.
A question and he didn't answer it. Why should men enforce women's rights? Why should they?
Because it is morally unacceptable to control others. It is morally impermissible.
That's the opposite.
Others.
You're not controlling. If you're enforcing their rights, it sounds like they're controlling you, right? Like, how are you controlling them by enforcing their rights?
But right is simply, as we've defined it, a privilege without a duty.
So why should men enforce women's privileges?
But they don't have to. So what are you defining as
Answer my question. Why should men enforce women's privileges?
They don't have to enforce women's privileges.
Great. I believe the exact same thing. Perfect. I'm going to go have a smoke.
But you don't have to enforce. Oh my goodness, he's upset.
He's coming back. He's just coming.
He's upset because you don't understand basic day one philosophy.
Do a little
Rage
smoke.
All right.
quit.
Are
I
you
got him.
kidding?
All right, we're gonna skip ahead a little bit because Andrew leaves and then she leaves, and then there's more super chats confronting Andrew's past. I don't know. The source of her morals. We're gonna start up again here because it's a very long debate, and we're not gonna watch all of the rest of it because I think we kind of get. I think we kind of get where this is going at this point. She had some good arguments in the voting section of the debate, but she's completely lost the plot with this one. And this is where it always falls apart.
So Kantian ethics, you're a universalist ethicist, you're a deontologist?
No, I wouldn't say. Honestly, I feel like neither consequentialism nor deontological ethics like fully encapsulate.
So you're a threshold deontologist?
I don't know. I think there's merit to both arguments.
Okay, so what do you
But
base
if
your
we would like
morality on?
to- I think I base my morality on physically how you are impacting other people. If you are hurting
That would be
others,
consequences.
Sure, but intent does play kind of a part in consequences.
That would be consequences as well. So if I have the intent to do good things and bad things happen to you, you'd say I shouldn't be doing those good things to you, right?
No, that's why I'm saying I think that there's a gray area between consequentialism and deontological.
So threshold deontology. So,
Sure.
Okay, great. So you're a threshold deontologist. Can you tell me what you base that on other than your own personal perspective?
Do you not believe that it's immoral
It's
to
not my
hurt
turn
other
to
people?
answer questions. Your turn for the internal critique.
Do you not believe it? Well, I believe it's
answer-
immoral to hurt other people. It is inherently wrong to hurt others. And
What
that's-
makes it inherently wrong?
Well, hurting other people is not. You think that's good?
That's just you making the claim and then it's called question begging. It's a question begging fallacy.
You're question
when
begging.
I say,
you continue to add.
do you even know?
Even using the term inherently in an argument is just so off base. Like, you can't just say, oh, it's inherent. Like, that's not an argument.
You know
Oh my
what
God,
question
good
begging
question.
means? What does it mean?
Oh my God, Andrew.
What does it mean?
You're trying to catch me in a logical
What does
fallacy
it
by
mean?
I'm answering. You're trying to catch me in a logical fallacy.
That's
by
not
asking me
answering. What does it mean?
Question begging. You're trying to catch
what
your
does
opponent.
it mean? It doesn't mean you're trying to catch your opponent. That's not what
That's
question begging
not-
means.
Will you let me finish?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's it mean?
You're trying to catch your opponent in a logical fallacy by asking them questions that inherently create a dissonance.
What the fuck are you talking about? That is not what the question begging fallacy is.
So then how do you define it?
It's not a definitional thing. It's a fallacious thing. When I ask you, is this inherent? You say, listen, it's inherent because it's inherent. It's inherent because it's inherent.
That's not what I said.
Great. What makes it inherent? What makes your morals inherent? What makes not hurting somebody else being bad inherent?
You don't think that hurting other people
That's
is bad?
asking me a question, not answering it. What makes hurting other people bad inherent?
Inherently, you are denying them the right to their bodily autonomy.
Yeah, but what makes that bad?
It's bad because it's hurting them. Hurting
Yeah,
someone
but
is
what
physically
makes
bad.
that bad?
You don't think that hurting something
That's
someone is
asking
bad?
me a question, not answering it.
It's bad because it's immoral.
It's bad because it's bad. Now you have done a circular, fallacious argument.
Sure.
What is bad? This thing over here that's bad. What makes it bad? The fact that it's bad. Why is it bad? Because it's bad? Is that why it's bad?
You sound like a
Is
cat
it
in the hat.
bad because it's bad because it's bad?
It is inherently wrong to hurt other people.
Yeah, what makes it inherently wrong to hurt other people?
It is inherently wrong to hurt other people because you are denying them their free will, you are causing them physical pain,
Mm-hmm.
and you are participating and exacerbating in suffrage
Yeah,
and
what
suffering.
what makes that bad though?
You don't think that causing other
That's
people to suffer
asking
is
me
bad.
a question. Asking me what makes it bad doesn't describe for me what makes it bad.
Hurting someone is bad
Because
you are denying them their right
yeah,
to
but
free
what
will
makes that part bad?
and perpetuating
Yeah,
suffering.
but what makes that part bad?
You don't think that suffering is bad.
No, that has nothing to do with what I think.
It does have
Here's
everything to do with what
here's
you-
how this
you think.
conversation's going, just so you know. I'm
Sure.
like, is eating candy bars bad? And you're like, it's bad. So what makes eating candy bars bad? And you
It's
say, well, because
unhealthy.
it's unhealthy for you. And I say, but why is being unhealthy bad? And you say, because eating candy bars is bad.
You are causing physical harm.
Okay,
You
so
are disrupting society.
so eating a donut is immoral?
I'm not talking about candy bars anymore.
Is eating a
I'm talking about
donut
your
immoral?
initial
Is eating a
statement.
donut immoral?
No, because you're not causing a physical harm
You're
to anyone
causing
else.
physical harm?
To someone else. It is an exercise
So
of
is
your free
making
will.
donuts immoral?
No.
But even if people are going to eat them and it causes them harm?
But eating one donut is not going to cause someone physical harm.
Yeah, but if
you
there's
eat a donut in excess, then that causes someone physical harm. But that is not something that you are policing. If you make donuts and then force someone to buy and eat 10
Got it.
donuts in front of you, then that
Okay.
would be causing a physical harm.
When you say the word inherently, what you mean is something which is like based inside the human experience? What do you mean by inherently?
I mean, on an instinctual level, does it not
Instinctual.
hurt someone to cause harm? Although, of course, there are people
I'm just
who
asking
are
what do you
sociopaths
what do you
and
mean
don't
by
feel that.
inherently?
I mean inherently as in on a very basic, it is a fact, inherent fact.
Oh, there's no such thing as an inherent fact. This is getting painful. She's just getting trapped in the same circle now of this whole concept of something just being inherent, and it's just not an argument. Nothing is inherent.
Fact.
Inherently, it means it's a fact.
I'm just saying
Ugh.
inherently as in it is implicit throughout every culture. Well, not every culture, but like it's implicit.
Okay, inherently means implicit. So it means always, like always something. It's inherent. It's like always this thing. Is that what that means?
I'm getting confused. What the fuck are you talking about?
I'm asking you what inherently means.
Why don't we just Google it? Why I'm not married.
I'm actually okay with you. If you want to
Yeah,
Google
can
the
we Google
definition
it?
of inherent.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
Brian can pull it up. I'm not trying to get a got you on the definition. I just want the definition.
Okay, yeah, then let's pull it up.
Existing in something as a permanent, essential, or
Like always.
characteristic
That's what I said.
attribute.
I said always.
So I just want to make sure. Hang on.
Yeah.
Existing. Read the rest of it.
There's a few others. Do you want
Just the first
Just
one's
the first
fine.
one.
Okay, existing in something as a permanent, essential, or characteristic attribute.
So it is a permanent attribute from your view that hurting somebody else is bad.
Yes.
Why?
Because you are causing them physical harm, which is a disruption to social order.
Why is that bad though?
Well, because you would have no social order, you would not be able to progress as a society, and physical harm is painful. You are causing someone pain. It is bad to cause someone
So
pain.
yeah.
I think that's an
But you
inherent
just
fact.
do you understand like what you keep saying is it's bad because it's bad.
Well, it's causing
because
a
it's
negative.
bad because it's bad.
You are taking something away from someone,
Mm-hmm.
which is their physical, like, just capability. and
So if
existence.
it were the case
Yes.
that most of society believed that enslavement was fine because it was inherent that some people were allowed to own other people, would that be bad?
But that's not an inherent truth.
Well, what makes physically hurting someone else an inherent truth?
Physically hurting someone else is an inherent truth because you are denying them bodily autonomy and the ability to control what happens to their body, and you are causing a net negative to that person.
Yeah, but you haven't actually told me why that part of that is bad, though.
Causing a net negative to others is bad on every single moral, like, as a Christian, you should know why hurting other people is bad.
I know why Christians think so. I don't know why you think so.
I think so because, again, you're robbing them of their bodily autonomy.
Yeah, but you don't tell me why that's actually bad. So you start, this is what makes it question begging. You start with the assumption as the conclusion. You start with the premise as a conclusion. Hurting people is bad because it's bad to hurt people.
Yes.
That's your position?
No, I'm saying hurting people is bad because you are robbing them of their physical autonomy and you are creating a net negative to another person.
So if you could hurt people collectively in some way and it causes good outcomes, would that be bad?
Yes.
Well, then you just negated what makes it bad.
Well, that's because I'm not a consequentialist.
Then why are you making the claim that this is bad if even the good results are still bad?
But it's not a good result if you are hurting people at a net negative. If it is a net negative, then it is not good. If hurting people is a universal net negative to those people,
Yeah.
and the more people you hurt, the more negative it is,
Yeah.
then hurting people in that instance is also bad.
What makes it a net negative, though?
Physically harming someone is negative to them. You are causing pain, which is a negative to them.
Okay, and do you agree that there are some groups who maybe have negative outlooks that you need to cause pain to?
If they are hurting other people and the negative of those people is outweighing the negative of hurting them, then potentially.
What if they just refuse to comply?
But that's why, like, going back to the force theory, that's why force is used in some situations to control others.
Mm-hmm.
And it is used immorally when it is not controlling someone who is putting a net negative.
I want to tell you about a little island called Papua New Guinea.
Oh boy. Okay, I know where he's going with this. The problem here is that she's trying to have like normative debate, and the only reason she's trying to do that is because she doesn't have a philosophical background, or like even just a day one understanding of philosophy. But you can't do that with Andrew. He won't let you do that. You have to be able to go all the way back to like the foundation of where your conclusion comes from, or he won't move on in the conversation. So from his Christian worldview, he would have answers for all of these things from the Christian perspective. There are ways to attack that, but she clearly doesn't know any of them, or even where her own beliefs come from. It's bad because it's bad, unless it's good because it's less bad, because things are bad unless they're less good or less bad. It's just nonsense. He's about to talk about a crazy tribe in Papua New Guinea that does weird stuff, though.
Oh, God.
On this little island called Papua New Guinea, there's a tribe called the Cum Warriors of Papua New Guinea. You might think I'm making this up. I'm not.
No, I feel like I've heard of this before.
This isolated tribe in Papua New Guinea, what they enjoy doing is, well, they have the yits of the tribe, the younglings, who are male, go over and blow all of the adults, essentially, the yits. They go over and, like, service them, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what they do.
Yeah.
However, when psychologists go and look at this, the kids there actually demand to do this because it's a part of their culture. Now, me as a Christian, I would say that's inherently bad.
Right.
Why would you? What basis could you have to justify if there's no negative outcome, which is what you're saying bad is?
If there's no negative outcome, well, there is a negative outcome.
They are demanding to do it.
Yeah, but psychologically, pedophilia does have an inherently negative outcome.
Well, PDF.
Even if
Let's say PDF.
Oh, right. Sorry.
But on top of that, right, even when you say that, the psychologist said that they were demanding to do this. It's part of their cultural right. They're demanding it. They don't want to not be adults in the culture. Me as a Christian, I would go in there and put an end to that fucking shit in 1 second. I would bring my military in there and I would kick them on the fucking ground and I'd take those kids out of there and be like, fuck that. A tribe like that doesn't even deserve to exist. That's what I would do.
Okay.
Okay? But from your perspective, why is that bad? If there's no psychological damage, they're demanding to do it, why is that bad?
Yeah, I don't really know, honestly. I'll concede that one.
Oh, she didn't just concede that one. She just conceded the whole last hour is what she just conceded. The entire last hour of this debate, she just conceded. All right, negative outcomes from feminism. We're going to skip ahead a little bit, and then we're probably...
My definition of bad have anything to do with what your definition of bad is?
Throughout this entire debate, you have been advocating against the free will and the bodily autonomy of a significant group of people.
My whole view...
Hold on, pause. You want to disenfranchise voters.
My whole view was already up for internal critique, and I gave you the entire internal critique of my argument of force doctrine for an hour and a half, and now it's my turn for the internal critique.
It was not an internal critique of the argument of force doctrine for an hour and a half. Let's calm down.
Do you know what time it is?
Yeah, it's about to be 5:45 around.
Yeah, so it was about an hour and a half. So here's the thing, right? When we get into feminism itself, if I can demonstrate to you that the outcomes of feminism have been bad, will you concede that it's bad? If I could.
If you can demonstrate that the outcome of feminism is bad, how would you, under the force doctrine, then that would be saying that
has nothing to do with my view.
No,
you're now under internal critique.
I'm saying that under the force doctrine, the only way to remove feminism would be through force. If we can both agree...
That's not the only way to remove feminism.
Really? But I thought all power comes through force.
So? So
then
what?
how would you remove power from
The
women?
fundamental building blocks of power would still be there, but it would not be the only way to remove feminism.
So you believe that there are other ways to fundamentally have and consolidate power besides force?
Well, it's not just a matter of power, though, right? So
But that is what
this
the
is
point of
the this
feminism
is the
is,
big
to
problem.
create
Is like you
equity
don't
and
even
power.
understand what's being said. But here's the thing. Back to this
Yes.
on feminism. Do you agree with me that feminism has not kept its promise of protecting women?
I think it's making progress. I think it's done better, but I don't think it's
Well,
complete.
how is it done better if we've had now about 150 years of feminism and women are in more dangerous situations they've ever been in the history of the United States?
Why do you believe women are in more dangerous situations now?
Well, I'm
than
sorry.
they were?
Do you agree with all of the RAINN statistics on sexual assault and all these various things?
Well, sexual assault statistically has increased, but again, the amount of reporting has also increased.
And so has STDs.
Before sexual
so
assault
has
was not.
so has STDs. So
Well, that
has
affects
so
men and women.
so have mental illness. Not as much as it does women, and
Okay,
not as
but I
much.
feel like
Hang on.
you're
Not as much
conflating-
as mental. Hang on. I'm going to give you the laundry list.
Sure.
Mental illness is much higher in women. Single motherhood much higher in women. Right. Divorcee much higher. Right. All of the by every single conceivable.
Shay's World. Yeah, I mean, he's full of himself, but she doesn't have enough of a philosophical understanding to refute him right now. She was doing better at the beginning of the debate when they were talking about voting rights and stuff, but ever since they got into like force doctrine and outcomes of feminism, she's been kind of a mess.
Metric for negative outcome, you would have to concede that we've had nothing but negative outcomes from feminism.
But I
the
think you're
intact family
conflating-
home has been completely eliminated due to feminism.
That's not true.
Yes, it is true.
I
Why
think
are
you're conflating causation and correlation, though.
okay? I'm sorry. Is it feminists
How are you
and
claiming that
feminist organizations that push for no-fault divorce all over the United States?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but do you think that we
divorce
have
is
more
necessary.
or less intact families because of that?
Okay, but living in an unhappy home, like why should people be subject to live in
What about the positive outcomes for children? Like, even if it were the case that you didn't really like your husband, but your children had better outcomes if you stayed with him, shouldn't you?
Your children will not have better outcomes.
If they
to live
did,
in.
wouldn't you?
Statistically, they do. Statistically, they do have better outcomes if even unhappy parents stay together. But there are other issues that contribute to that. It's not, she doesn't know the refutations to any of this.
I personally would rather live in a family that is separated, but both of my
I know
parents
that's
are happy
great what
and
you would
healthy,
personally like to
then-
do, but if it were the case that
I think most children would, though. I mean, if you're in
if
an
it were the case though,
Okay, but what if you're in an
if it were
abusive
the
home?
case though that you were to be in a relationship with a man, you didn't particularly like him, but you stayed together and your children had better results because you stayed together, right? Would you stay together with him? That's my question.
Yes, but what if you're
Yes.
forgetting about you're
Okay.
forgetting about abusive relationships. You're forgetting about a relationship in which one parent is an addict.
Nope, not
you're
forgetting.
forgetting about one parent in
So
a
here, we'll
relationship
go
in which a parent
over-
is a cheater.
Yeah, we'll go over
a
those
child
too.
would be significantly more beneficial
I'll
to
give
a
you
child to
the
be removed
yeah.
from a
I'll give you the
parent.
stats there as well.
that is-
So as we dive into this, understand that cohabitation between men and women is what leads to mostly abuse, not marriage. The marriage rates of abuse are very low in comparison to cohabitation. Cohabitation is the standardization which you see with divorcees. That's where most of the abuse comes from. Where it doesn't come from usually is from the husband in the home.
But you're saying that cohabitation is leading to abuse and marriage is cohabitation.
No.
Yeah, no, he's separating those two things. Cohabitation would be like the new guy that moves in after your husband leaves. And that is statistically where the most abuse happens for children. The most abuse happens for children is if they enter the foster system. But
Cohabitation would be you're living with a man without being married to him.
Okay, so you think that they should marry, but like,
there's a case of her needing to learn more public speaking skills. I actually think that her public speaking is fantastic. She hasn't faltered ever in her projection or her confrontation. She's done a much better job of staying in the conversation than everyone else he debated this week. Like there was that Kylie Brewer girl who just completely fell apart like 60 seconds into the debate. And it was basically just like it was a complete disaster the entire time. I think her public speaking is great. She needs to take a couple like basic philosophy classes so that she understands, like, she's making the classic mistake of she has a conclusion which may or may not be correct, and she's worked her way backwards through the argument instead of starting with a foundation, like a philosophical foundation for an argument, and then working her way to the argument. So whenever Andrew, like, she'll start with the conclusion and Andrew will push her back and back and back until they get to the point where she didn't think that far back. And that's where they keep getting stuck, or well, where she keeps getting stuck. And Andrew, on the other hand, has a vast understanding of philosophy and epistemic foundations. So when you get all the way back on his, it always just falls back on the Christianity thing. And she doesn't know how to refute that because she doesn't have a counter understanding of philosophy that's strong enough to overcome Andrew's. It's super unfortunate, but her ability to do public speaking and be confrontational, I think, is on par with Andrew. It's just her understanding of and her ability to back up her conclusions with evidence and claims and stuff like that.
That would be having a child out of wedlock, which is
Yeah, you don't need to
against
have
the
a
Christian
child
religion.
out of wedlock either.
Oh, I see. Wow, that's a very sound way to argue. I'm actually taking your thought. Oh, thank you very much, Shay's World. I appreciate it a lot.
Like, these things are not mutually exclusive. So if it is the case you have cohabitation, it leads to more abuse. The prescription for that, for the less negative outcome, would be marriage, right?
No, the prescription of that would be to separate those two people. If cohabitation of two partners who are not married is leading to abuse, then why should those people then get married?
Yeah, okay.
That doesn't make any sense.
Okay, no. The fact that they're
Oh, okay. So right now, Andrew's not talking about cohabitation that leads to marriage necessarily. Although statistically that is sort of not the best idea. But it's marginal. He's talking about post-marriage cohabitation with a different person, which is statistically extremely dangerous for children.
married, and the fact that when you're married, there's less abuse than when you cohabitate, would point and indicate that cohabitation is a bad idea. Not that marriage is a bad idea.
No, I think it would point and indicate that couples who cohabitate without being married, it's better. Why should they get married? Why should you get married to someone who you cannot even cohabitate with?
Because abuse rates skyrocket when you cohabitate and are not married.
So those who are cohabitated in an abusive relationship, once they get married, you're claiming that
cohabitation
that abuse stops.
itself leads to more abuse.
Okay. So then why would the remedy of that be for those two people to get married?
Because oftentimes the cohabitation begins from divorce.
So you're saying that cohabitation, what the fuck does that even mean?
It means that post-divorce, women tend to cohabitate more, especially when they have kids. And it's the cohabitation with these people which leads to the abuse in their kids or the abuse of them.
So you're saying that they should stay in an unhappy relationship instead of leaving that
Only if we
relationship
care
to
about
cohabitate.
outcomes. And you said, if it is the case that I stayed with my man and the outcome for my kid was better, you should probably do that. So if it's the case that I can demonstrate for you
But what about
that
the
when
outcome-
women leave their husband, the abuse rates for them and their kids skyrocket
But
for
what about the
cohabitation.
But what about the outcome for that woman? What about the outcome for that man?
My turn.
I mean, that's a net
my
negative
turn,
for two
my
adults versus a net
Still
negative
my
for,
turn.
for a child.
Here's what you said. You said specifically, if it is the case that I'm married and the results are better for my
Is her mom calling again? She's really got to tell her mom where she is.
kids.
Wait, one second.
1 second. You gotta filibuster the
My mom is
debate.
calling me, hold on.
Why is your mom calling you in the middle of a debate?
While she's doing that, here,
There we go.
hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. Now we're gonna
Okay, we're gonna skip super chats again. Oh, okay, the silly pickle jar thing. I mean, I guess we can see who can open the jar. That's kind of boring. Return to cohabitation. There we go.
Be able to promote that women can also get a divorce as well as men, I don't think is advocating in favor of cohabitation, and both can be true. I don't think that those are mutually exclusive.
There's better topics to cover, I think.
Do you want
The
to
problem with that is that
I actually agree with Brian. There's better topics to cover.
we're using your metric for what is bad. Under your metric for what is bad is the negative outcomes. There's negative outcomes with those relationships, therefore they are bad.
I already told you that I'm not an inherent consequentialist.
Yeah, I know, but every time I try to get a justification out of you, you just went back to negative outcomes. Otherwise, bad is bad is bad is bad is bad is bad.
Okay,
is
but
bad.
you can't really quantify the net negative outcome of something that doesn't happen.
Actually,
or
I
doesn't
can
exist.
quantify the negative net outcome. I can look at what happens to the children who are abused. I can give you the stats from the NIS. I went over all of them yesterday, right here on this very program with a different feminist debater.
So then what you're arguing is against cohabitation, but not against the right
Unless
to get
it's
a divorce.
feminists who are doing everything they can in order to produce the outcomes for marriage and cohabitation.
I mean, I don't know who you're talking to, but I'm
You
not
don't know
doing
who I'm
everything I
talking
can
to?
produce the outcomes against.
Got
Like
it.
you can say that cohabitation is bad, but women still deserve a right to divorce a husband that is.
Okay, well, let's move on. We'll move on to the next one. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And we'll do the final internal critique for the debates done. What's the next topic, Brian? Or do you want me to bring one up?
Do you
Oh,
have
yeah.
something I mean, we could cover differentials when it comes to privilege, male privilege versus female privilege.
What's the question? What's the
Do you believe that do you
This is like Brian's favorite topic. He does this during the podcast all the time.
think male privilege exists?
Yeah, I mean, in
And
a certain sense,
is
yes.
it greater than female privilege?
I think that we all have inherent privileges, and I think it's important to talk about intersectionality when we talk about privilege. Because,
Yeah, but
you
what's the question is asking specifically, do you think that
know, Andrew, you don't let me finish my
Yeah,
statement.
because-
You want me to finish the statement because you don't know where I'm going with it?
yes or no, do men have more privilege in society?
I think some men do, yes. But again, like I would think that a disabled man probably has less privilege than a able-bodied woman, depending on what his disability
If
is.
we were to take
That's a good answer. Maybe she can hold her own on this topic.
all women and put them collective as a group and all men collective as a group, would you say that men are more advantaged or have privileges over women, or that women are privileged and have advantages over men?
Yeah, I would say collectively, men probably have more privileges. than
Okay,
women.
so now we understand exactly what it is that we're arguing. So let
Yes.
me just start with this. What about the draft?
What about the draft?
So how is it that men are privileged over women when men can be drafted and women cannot?
Well, that would be an example of when women have a privilege over men. I don't think the draft should apply to anyone, though. To be
But
honest,
it
I
does
think the
apply
draft is-
to men,
I know,
right?
and I don't.
Yeah, the draft has to apply. And it has to be men. But that's fine. I would consider it a privilege to be among the group that is required to protect the country. That would be my counter argument.
I don't even think we should have a draft.
But
I
we
think that
do
that
have a
is
draft.
inherently immoral as well.
Yeah, but we do have a draft. We do, descriptively.
I know, and we should.
And how could it be that men, young men especially, can be drafted at the age of 18, 19, 20 years old, be sent to fight wars often on behalf of women who can vote them into those wars, right? How is that a privilege that men have? And what is if you had to pick anything that you could point to for women that is on par with that duty that men have, I want to hear what it is.
I would say probably the societal role of the traditional wife and the inability for certain women, or the promotion of an idea that women should not be allowed to work.
Who promotes that women should not be allowed to work?
You do.
Oh, nope. She doesn't know Andrew's argument on this one. All right, well, she's going to learn it.
No, I don't.
So you think that women should be allowed to work?
Women have always been able to work.
And you think that outside of the home?
Yeah, of course they've always been able to
Oh,
work outside the home.
Hey, that's great.
What does that have to do with anything?
I mean, part of the whole manosphere and like the promotion of these social norms and social roles.
That's where you're wrong.
So yeah. Oh boy. She has some preconceived notions based on probably clips that she's seen but there's no part of the manosphere that thinks that women shouldn't be allowed to work. There are areas that think women should be encouraged to certain fields. There are areas that think women should maybe postpone working to focus more on the childbearing aspect during those years where it's easier to do that, and then get back to work later in life. There are a lot of different thoughts here. I don't think anyone is saying that women shouldn't have the right to work at all. I don't think that's, I've never seen that when I dig into the actual, like, the context of, like, maybe some little clips that she's seen that kind of make it seem like that. So, yeah, we'll
You
see.
see,
Really?
actually, you have the more misogynistic view.
No, but I'm against
You have the more
that.
misogynistic view. The truth is that what the manosphere would say is that a lot of them say, no, those women need to fucking work, otherwise they're in a position of privilege being at home. So let me ask you this. Are women in a position
What
of privilege?
manosphere podcaster is saying
Oh, you
that?
hear them say it all the time. Are women in a position
Really?
of privilege?
Candace Owens
Hang
isn't
on,
saying
stop,
that.
stop.
Myron Gaines isn't saying that.
Stop. Yeah, they do. But here's
Andrew
the
Tate is
thing.
not saying
I'll
that.
demonstrate it for
None
you.
of them are
Are
saying
women
that.
in a position of privilege when they're stay-at-home moms?
No.
Are they in a position of privilege when they're working?
Unless they, I mean, I think that they're in a position of equality or equity. That's the goal.
But so then that would mean, by that logic, they're oppressed by being stay-at-home moms.
I think that if they are not using their free will to decide whether or not they're a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah, they're a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
Are they privileged or not privileged? Is it a privilege to be a stay-at-home mom, or is it not a privilege to be a stay-at-home mom? Or is it a privilege for women to work, or is it not a privilege to work?
I think it depends circumstantially. If a stay-at-home mom is choosing and has her free will to be a stay-at-home mom, and that is an
Yeah.
arrangement that she made with her husband, who would also like to do that, then it can be, yes. But if a woman does not have the right to make that choice, and if you are, proposing a society in which we follow strict gender rules and societal rules in which
Yeah, but
only women can-
gender norms show women always working, always having worked.
Yes.
The idea is gender norms, what they don't show is that it's a good idea for women to take their reproductive years and work outside of the home. That's stupid. That
No,
makes
it's
no
not.
sense. Yes, of course.
How do you establish yourself in a career if you actively have a child at home?
You establish yourself in a career after your childbearing years, like everybody else
So
would.
you have to start work at 40?
Versus having children at 40?
But you don't have. You can do both though. You can
but
have
here's
children.
the thing.
You can do both. I don't know if she's going to be able to make this argument properly, but you can make this argument. It's very possible.
Hey, this
And
is what's so funny.
establish a career.
Do you think then that if you moms split their attention between their children and their career, that their children are going to get as much attention as they would if the mom didn't have a career?
But why should a mother not have the ability to have a career
For
if
their
she-
children.
Well, then just don't have children. if you
They
don't
would
want
do
them.
right, exactly. This is my point though, right? It's like, so why
Dude,
wouldn't
but
you
women make up 47% of the labor force. Literally millions of women
Yeah.
do this every day.
Yeah, and you know what happens? Our birth rate, do you know what it's at?
It's a lot lower, significantly.
Why?
Because women are having kids older. But that's free will. You can't just usurp someone's right to have free will
do you
because
think-
their job is to have
So
a
let me
baby.
ask you, is it a negative thing that the birth rate is declining to the point where we can't even sustain our population?
Well, we could if we'd allow immigrants to come in. But
Wait. So you want to replace the population?
no, I'm not a replacement theorist. But at
You
the
want to
same
replace
time,
the population?
Can we go back?
No.
to-
Can you answer the question? If it is the case that our population's massively decreasing, which you just conceded it is, because women are having children older, which you just conceded they are,
Sure.
and you say that's a good thing,
I'm not.
and
saying
then
that's
say
a-
it wouldn't, it
We can fix the birth rate without forcing women to stay in the home. These things are not mutually exclusive. There are other issues that contribute much more heavily to falling birth rates than women going to work. It's coinciding but separate attitudes that are causing this. But I don't think she knows how to argue this.
wouldn't go down if we had immigrants come in. How's that not replacing the population?
I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I don't understand what your solution is. Should women not be allowed to work until
It's
after
your
they've had
internal
children?
critique time now. Tell me real
Should
quick.
women not be allowed to
Tell
work
me real quick
until they've had children?
Why are you asking me questions instead of answering them now? It's my turn to ask the question. So
Why is that? Who
because
said
you
that?
just
We're having an open discussion.
you just internally critiqued, and I allowed you for over an hour at least my position, my turn. So real quick, can you
sure.
tell me why it is that when you get to the point where you cannot replace your own population, and you say, well, we wouldn't have a problem with that if we opened it up to immigrants, how is that not you advocating for replacement?
I'm not advocating for complete replacement. I'm not saying people should just stop working and stop having children and it should be entirely up to immigrants. But I mean, if we did have more channels for immigrants to come into this country legally, you know, we might
Would
not be so
that
worried about the
replace the
population.
domestic population?
What's the problem with doing that, though?
What, don't.
I mean,
would
are we
it,
not all humans?
Would it replace the domestic population?
It wouldn't completely replace it.
Would it mostly replace it?
It would add. Why is it replace? It's adding. It's
Because if the
addition.
people who are okay, let me ask you this: is it a good thing that Native Americans don't have a lot of kids?
Why aren't they having kids?
Well, is it a good thing that they are or are not? Would you rather see Native Americans having more kids?
I mean, I don't.
Like, why is it a bad thing
What?
that we came over here and took land from the Native Americans and replaced their population? Why is that bad?
Well, because we killed millions of people and caused
no,
significant
well,
amounts
no,
of
no.
suffering.
Actually,
it was human suffering. It was genocide.
Actually, most
I mean,
of
what
most
do you
hang
think,
on,
like,
most of
what do you
what
mean,
killed
why is
most
genocide
of
bad?
most of what killed Native Americans was not genocide; it was disease.
The Trail of Tears killed millions of people.
Okay, that actually no, the trail.
A couple handfuls of thousands, maybe. There weren't even millions of people there, I don't think.
Trail of Tears didn't kill millions of people.
Yes, it did.
How many millions do you think died in the Trail of Tears?
Let's Google it.
Google it.
All right.
Oh boy.
How many millions died at the Trail of Tears?
It says an estimated 4,000 out of 16,000 Cherokee people, or wait, forced to relocate. Let me see deaths.
How many millions?
Yeah, you can't kill millions of people out of 16,000. That'd be called math.
It says estimate that 6,000 men, women, and children die on the 1,200-mile march called the Trail of Tears, Cherokee.
Okay.
So is 6,000?
That's still bad. That's still a lot of people, and it was still horrible. But millions isn't 6,000.
Anywhere close to million?
Andrew's doing the thing right now, by the way. I just want to point out, Andrew's doing the thing that he always makes fun of Destiny for doing, where they stick their head in their hands and they're like, just wanted to point that out.
So let's just look at
And
colonization.
millions.
How many Native American people were killed from colonization? Can you Google that one for me?
Yeah, disease.
How
No,
many
no,
Native
no. How many
no,
were
no,
killed by
no.
disease?
How many Native
Millions.
Americans killed by...
Colonization. It's millions of people.
No, disease killed them. Disease killed the overwhelming amount of
You
Native
know that
Americans.
we used chemical warfare, or not we.
Oh, we did, huh?
Yes.
So we didn't understand anything about how diseases worked, but we were able to use diseases for chemical warfare, huh?
What do you mean we?
Not knowing about how they worked doesn't mean that we couldn't have still used them. We may have had a different understanding about what we were doing, but those are not mutually exclusive things.
We didn't understand how
Would
disease
you
worked.
like-
When do
I
you
never said
think?
that.
When do you think we understood the disease process?
You know that smallpox blankets that were infected with smallpox
Total
were
myth.
given and gifted to. No,
How-
it's not.
how- do
No,
you-
the fuck it's not.
Okay,
Bullshit,
let me ask you a
Andrew. It's not
question.
a myth.
You get sick,
Yeah.
and you don't understand how the disease process works.
All right, we're skipping the rest of the colonization history lesson because it's sort of just like a total tangent.
College? Do you think women should?
I would just advocate for a national campaign which asks women to keep the traditional family intact because it's going to lead to the most amount of children, and to defer those college age years, just like we did a national campaign to try to move women into college. I would do a national campaign to say defer those years for childbearing, and you can always go to college later after your kids are grown, or you can do it from
Oh,
home.
that's not fun. That's not the point of college. Did you go to college?
The point of college is to go fuck?
No.
What's the point?
The point of college is to learn while you are young so that you can gain skills that help you in the workforce and develop a career over time. It takes time to develop a
Yeah, that doesn't really refute his point because you can do that from home.
career.
You
can't
can
just do that
develop.
whenever.
You can develop the. First of all, most of the people are getting degrees. By the way, they ain't using those fucking degrees in any of those fields, are they? What's your degree going to be in? What's it going to be in?
Fucking your mom. No, I'm joking. Film production.
And do you think that you're going to end up a film
Jesus.
producer?
Hopefully, that's the goal.
But I mean, do you think that the chances that most people who have a degree in film production are producing film?
I mean, I happen to go to the best film school in the country, but you know,
Yeah,
I'm
and
sure
just
a lot
like
of people
I just
aren't.
had a woman I
But-
talked to yesterday who got a degree in comedy writing.
Oh well, sorry.
Or psychology or sociology. These fields are completely oversaturated.
But these skills are still useful, and we also know that.
Oversaturated.
But we also know that people, on average, who get a college degree, the median income for those people is higher.
Yeah, but guess what? The negative effects mentally much higher than if they don't have children. They're college educated.
So your plan is to usurp people's free will.
How are
on
you
their
usurping it by
behalf.
having a campaign just asking people to defer?
Okay, and then if they choose not to do that, what
They
happens?
can choose, but
Okay.
here's the thing: it was extraordinarily.
Then do that. Have fun.
It was extraordinarily effective to have the propaganda which said that women should be going to college. If you look at the college rates pre the propaganda, post it, right? You can see that it had a great effect. You could have the same type of effect which asked women to defer that for childbearing years because they're happier, more well-adjusted, and guess what you would be promoting then? The old school gender roles.
Women fought an entire, I mean, not fought physically, but women had many movements on the basis of demanding the right to choose whether or not they go to college and when. Why would we do that if we didn't want
First of all-
Are you saying that the feminist revolution is
No,
a propaganda
first of all,
movement?
when it came to college, it
I
was
mean,
real.
there's currently more women in college
When
than
it
men.
came
If
to
we
college,
didn't want to be here,
so when
why
it
would
came
we
to
be?
college, there was very few. There was these Ivy League colleges. There was very few colleges ever, and most men never went to college either. That's the truth. Almost nobody ever went to college. It was about the best and the brightest. And what's happened is we've lowered the deviated standards so anybody can fucking go to college. Now it's become a requirement for an entry-level job to go to college, which is insane.
But that's an issue with capitalism. That's
It's
not an issue.
I tend to agree with Andrew on these points surrounding college. Historically, he's correct. That is how the trend went. And now we like literally propagandize kids throughout all of elementary, middle, and high school to think that you have to go to college, and you don't really have to go to college to make an income and have a career and all that. There are a lot of outcomes, or there are a lot of alternatives that would lead to better outcomes for a lot of people. And yeah, it's kind of a mess. The whole thing's kind of a mess right now. We're kind of in a mess right now.
Issue with
Feminism.
capitalism.
It
It's an
is.
issue with
Hold
stupid
on just one
feminist
moment.
propaganda.
It's not feminist
Just a moment.
propaganda.
Just a moment. I need to do a quick sidebar with both of you really quick. So viewers, we're going to take a 20-30 second intermission. Just stay tuned. Hold on for just a moment.
What do we do?
Okay, we're going to skip ahead to the closing statements, and then it looks like they do a bunch of other random stuff after, but we're not gonna do that because this has been long enough.
I think my goal societally is to advance us towards a mutually beneficial society. And I think that a lot of the arguments made are not only negative towards men, but women as well. So socially, and I think that there are three negative impacts of kind of hating on the goal of equality, and they're social, economic, and political. So socially, it's fair to state that people are generally happier when they have free will, and that it is, although we cannot agree on a definition of free will, it is inherently better to have a society in which all of us have a basic capacity for will over their body and bodily autonomy. I think that a lot of we didn't really talk that much about feminism, if I'm being honest. My closing statement is mostly about that. But I guess what I'll say is that everyone deserves the right to free will without judgment, and that goes for men as well as women. I think that a lot of the idea that men have to maintain force over others, and that if they don't do that, they are emasculating themselves, is inherently stifling to young men. I think it's negative to young men. I think it encourages aggression against each other and against women. And I would argue that the equal force doctrine is inherently immoral. It is immoral to police and dictate society exclusively on the basis of force. If that was the case, then all of our presidents would be the president because they won a
He's sticking his head into the microphone because that's not even kind of the claim that he made in regards to force doctrine. She didn't understand any part of that hour of the debate at all.
arm wrestle. I think economically, women do make up 47% of the labor force. Like it or not, women add trillions of dollars to the GDP alongside men every year. If we were to have women just step away from working and exclusively run the household, we would be economically handicapping our own society. And in terms of men, the wage stagnation for the middle class, which we didn't even get into, there's been incredible amounts of wage stagnation for middle class and lower income workers. According to Pew Research, after adjusting for inflation, middle class and lower income workers are making about the same now as they did in 1978. They have the same spending power. However, the cost of housing and living has gone up dramatically. From 1970, the median home price was $23,000, which, accounting for inflation, is about $180,000 to today. And in 2025, the median home price in Q1 of this year was $416,000. So it's almost 3 times as high as it was in 1978. So the average cost of raising a child is around $21,000 a year in the U.S. Of course, that depends on where you are, but that's the national average. I think it is entirely up to men to put and it puts the burden entirely on men to financially compensate for their household. You know, you're kind of disenfranchising them on a level as well. I think the economic standard you're trying to hold men to is impossible and unfair, and I don't think that you've had to live it because you're not the age of most men who are starting a family and who are starting work and who are starting to carry the financial burden of a society in which they are the sole providers for their household. And then again, money is power. And if women don't have the ability to make money, then they don't have the power to dictate what they do with themselves. And they don't have the power to get basic resources for their children, like food and water and lights and housing. And then politically, I think this one got kind of messy because Andrew doesn't seem to believe in basic representation for either men or women, but I believe in a representative government. I think that it is fundamentally illogical and practically impossible to create a government that is not based on the representation of all people. I just think that's immoral. And maybe I can't answer why that is, but I think a lot of people agree that they would like the right to vote. And just because you are stupid does not deny you the right to vote. But despite being slightly more than half of the US population, women have yet to make up 30% of the government. In history, the total number of female Supreme Court justices is 6 out of 116. That's like 5%. And I just don't think you can claim to have a representative democracy if it has never accurately represented the population. But it doesn't sound like Andrew wants a representative democracy anyway, so I guess that's besides the point. But in closing, I think that it's important to note that you literally cannot have a society of men or only women. We actively just have to work together. There's nothing we can do to avoid having to live and work together. And I think that by thank you. Oh, you're talking.
You're good.
Sorry, how much time do I have left?
Andrew will give his closing statement, so you can take your time, though, to finish up.
Yeah, but anyway, I think that enforcing stringent gender norms, and I think that enforcing strict gender roles, and I think that encouraging people to fall into those roles if that's not how they would like to exercise their free will is inherently immoral. I do. It fundamentally is. To force people to do things that they do not want to do is an immoral act. And it hurts both men and women because we fundamentally cannot exist without each other. We are the same species, and I don't know. We just got to make it work.
All good?
Yep.
Okay.
My nose is itchy.
Did you hear? You want to just check your phone, see if you heard?
There were a couple of points in there. They weren't like coherent though. Like, that was a good point about the financial aspect, but she's not able to tie all of her ideas together because some of them just fundamentally counter each other. It's unfortunate.
From him.
Yeah.
All right, Andrew, would you like to give your closing statement?
Yeah, so my opponent, this debate was particularly annoying because she just literally has no idea what she's talking about. She contradicted herself multiple times. She conceded the force doctrine. She said that there was millions of people who died on the Trail of Tears, just to name a few crazy ass things that she said. When she did a question begging fallacy, which then moved on into another contradiction when we went into what actually even makes a thing bad. She couldn't decide on what even her ethical purview was, in which she was holding feminism to the standard of an ethical purview. We couldn't even get past a lot of that. So then we move into feminism itself. She ends up conceding to most of my points there as well. She says that if the Japanese, if their birth rate went down, that would be bad by her standard. If white people, wouldn't be bad. But then she contradicted that as well. It was just one contradiction after another. In fact, I would say, out of all the opponents I've ever had, this particular one contradicted herself more than maybe any other I've ever dealt with. When I go back through it and we clip it up, I got a feeling that it's just going to be like 800 contradictions. The other thing to focus on too is that she conceded altogether force doctrine. She ended up at the very end explaining that she not only agreed that it's descriptively true, but that men have no obligation whatsoever to utilize force on behalf of women. There's no moral ought for them to do that, which is exactly what force doctrine dictates. So she made a complete concession on that as well. She says that hating on equality is stupid, but we started to kind of dive into this. We weren't able to get to it, but a bit on college when she conceded the point that the standards have been lowered to the point where now a degree is necessary to get a job. You can see this with DEI across the board. It's not an empowerment of anybody. It's a lowering of standards, which hurts everybody. And that's actually what's been going on in society for a long time, is the lowering of standards. That includes with college, right? She concedes that most of the population is stupid. That was what she said. She said, you're right. Most people are stupid. Yet, I don't think she would say most women who go to college are stupid, which is interesting, isn't it, right? Most population is stupid. Most women who go to college are not. But if you agree that most of the population is stupid, then you would probably have to concede that most of the population who goes to college is also stupid, which means the standards have been lowered there so that they can pass college, right? She says 47% of the labor force are women, and then she acts like that's a choice, right? She's like, no, women are empowered because they have the choice to do that. It's like, no, they don't actually have the choice to be stay-at-home moms in two-income economy anymore, and that is taking choice away from women. That's not empowering anybody. And if you look at the mental health crisis of women, it's almost always related to their obligations at work and family, where if they could just focus on one or the other, those mental health issues tend to deteriorate. So on basically every single point my opponent lost, it was wild to see, but she mostly lost because I was willing to stand up to the internal critique of my view of force doctrine and still got the concession out of her on what force doctrine was and the application of it. And then on top of that, every subsequent point, I basically got a concession out of. So I don't really know how much more I could have won this particular debate, but I do appreciate having it.
You want to keep going?
Did you hear back from...
No, I didn't, but let's just do it.
All right, we're not going to keep going. That was... It happened. She started off strongish. She had some pretty decent refutations to Andrew's ideas about voting. She didn't use the strongest refutation, which was disappointing. The strongest refutation to limiting the vote is that the more people you limit from voting, the more likelihood there is that those people will feel disenfranchised and turn to violent revolution because they don't feel like they have any say over what's going on. This is why when we've had kings and there was no type of democracy or representation at all, you ended up with violent revolution. since we've had democracy, we've really had one revolution, kind of. It would be the Civil War. It's the only really large-scale violent conflict that's happened within the United States. And that really didn't have anything to do with like a certain group of the population disagreeing with the government. That was more of a states' rights versus federal rights thing that turned into a slavery thing. And I mean, we all know the history of the Civil War. When we got into force doctrine and the rest of it, she completely fell apart. It was sad to see. She is reasonably well spoken as far as like public speaking goes. She stayed in the conversation a lot more than most of the other people he debated this week. The other ones were really bad. They didn't have any refutations for anything. It was just like a mess. But yeah, that's gonna do it for tonight. You want more of my thoughts? I gave them throughout the debate. And thank you for everyone who hung out. We had a pretty big chat today. We had a good amount of concurrent viewers for a week-old channel. And I want to thank you all for